Okay. Council, I'll call this meeting to order. It's a special council meeting. I think I'm echoing here. I won't call this to order. I think I do.
Testing.
Okay. All right. Let's try it again. Special council meeting of Monday, July 31, 2023. Our first order of business will be to read the land acknowledgement, and I'll turn it to Councillor Jeffrey for the honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. For more than 15,000 years, the First Nations walked upon and cared for the lands we now call home. Anishinaabek, Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe, and many others who were families, friends, and communities the way we are today. The town of Collingwood acknowledges the Lake Simcoe-Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818 and the relationship it establishes with the original inhabitants of Turtle Island. We acknowledge the reality of our shared history and the current contributions of Indigenous people within our community. We seek to continue empowering expressions of pride amongst all of the diverse stakeholders in this area, and we seek to do better and to continue to recognize, learn, and grow in friendship and community, nation to nation.
I'm now looking for a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda. The motion is as follows: that the content of the special council agenda for July 31, 2023 be adopted as amended. 3 amendments. 1, addition to item 2.1. It's the July 26th Spark in the Park minutes. 2, addition of departmental updates. That's the OLT update. And 3, addition of staff report for item 7.4, CAO 2023-09, resources review, engineering, environmental services, and public works. Councillor Potts and Deputy Mayor Fryer, thank you so much. Any comments or changes? All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest today? Councillor Potts?
Thanks, Mayor Hamlin. Just wanted for, on the record, item 6.2.1 under the Community Center feasibility. I consulted with the Integrity Commissioner regarding a family member who had been working in the Parks and Rec department, and at this time there is no conflict in place. So,
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Deputy Mayor Fryer?
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. I wanted to address actions from last Monday when PRC 2023-03 Community Center was on the table for council discussions. At the time, I recused myself by what I considered to be an abundance of caution. Since then, I've contacted the Integrity Commissioner and have confirmed that there's no conflict of interest or no code of conduct concern. I knew the matter would be coming to this formal council meeting, which gave me the opportunity still. So I do plan on participating in 6.2.1.
Thank you. So, yes, Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. So similarly, at the last meeting, I had also recused myself for the same concerns and have had clarification also from the Integrity Commissioner that it's a non-disqualifying conflict. So
Okay,
I will
this
be
is
participating.
good news for everybody. I'm now looking for a motion to adopt these minutes and a mover and a seconder, that the minutes of the council meeting held July 24, 2023, and Spark in the Park held July 26, 2023, be approved as presented. Councillor Baines and seconded by Councillor Ring. Comments? All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Is there any business arising from the previous minutes? Seeing none, we're over to departmental updates, and our update today is from Director Valentine on our Ontario Land Tribunal appeals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Today we have 3 updates on active Ontario Land Tribunal appeals, to which I'll be referring to as the OLT for ease of reference. So the first is with respect to a proposed zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision for 452 Raglan Street. The appeal by the appellant, which is Eden Oak, was related to a lack of municipal decision on the file within Land Use Planning Act timeframes. As per the council in-camera direction, the scheduled hearing event, which took place in July, was converted to a settlement hearing. We understand that the proceedings were very short. They were less than a half day. in time and resulted in a verbal decision from the tribunal member that generally supported the settlement as good planning. We do expect that there will be a written decision to follow, and as with all OLT decisions, that will be posted publicly when it's available, and council does have key messages in hand should they be contacted by any members of the public seeking information on this particular appeal. And if you do need a resend of that document, please let me know and I'm happy to do so. Second update is regarding an OLT appeal by Consulate Developments for a non-decision regarding a zoning bylaw amendment to increase the permitted density for a proposed development known as Bridgewater on Georgian Bay. A scoped hearing did proceed on May 17th and it continued for 3 days. The scoping of the hearing was based, again, on in-camera council direction that was informed by professional opinions from town planning staff, our consultant, the town solicitor, the NBCA, peer reviewers, and in addition, a review of the supporting documentation provided by the experts working on behalf of the applicant. There was no verbal decision issued at the termination of that particular hearing. However, we have now received the written decision, which was released on July the 25th and was circulated to council for your information. The OLT ruled in favor of the appellant on the primary issue of the hearing, which was the provision of a percentage of smaller units within the development to promote housing affordability. The provisions requiring smaller units were not accepted as appropriate for the site and were therefore not included by the tribunal in the approved zoning bylaw. The town is in the process of bolstering supportive policies in this regard through the new official plan, which coincidentally is also on the agenda for today. And lastly, we have received 2 new appeals. The first appeal was launched by Lafarge Canada, and that was to a decision of council to approve the zoning bylaw amendment to implement the draft plan of subdivision known as Panorama North. At this time, the developer and the appellant are engaging in without prejudice discussions without a need for active involvement of the town or staff. Ideally, these conversations would result in the withdrawal of the appeal without any amendments being required to the approved zoning bylaw. But should that change and an elevated role for the town become necessary, then staff will be bringing forward a report in camera to seek direction from council. The second appeal is again for a non-decision, meaning that the municipality did not make a decision within the timelines outlined in the Planning Act for a requested official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment to alter and expand permissions for higher density residential development at the properties known as 580, 596 Street. And I do want to be very clear, and Councillor Jeffrey did bring this up the last time, that this is a very complex file and there's a high degree of interest from the surrounding residents. So certainly council wasn't negligent in not making a decision at the appropriate time. In fact, staff and the technical reviewers are still evaluating the application, and a report has not been brought forward yet with a professional land use planning opinion through staff on the proposal. Under the Planning Act, we do have a 15-day window where an appeal is received that we have to compile the municipal record and send it forward through to the Ontario Land Tribunal. So planning staff, grateful for the support of the mayor and the CAO, did use this window to meet with the appellant to determine if the appeal could be withdrawn. And I'm happy to report that collectively we were successful in outlining a path that was preferable to the developer with respect to the timing of the 6th Street development, and the appeal has in fact now been withdrawn. Staff are working with the proponent to advance the report this fall. Likely you will see it on the October agenda, if not sooner, and that'll provide council with the opportunity to make a decision on the file. Thank you, Madam Chair. That concludes the updates, and happy to answer any questions should there be any from council.
Thank you so much. Are there any councillors with questions of our director? No, I see none. I should recognize Councillor Doherty is here, but attending virtually. Sorry, I didn't introduce you earlier. The next item on the agenda is 6.1. This arises out of our Committee of the Whole meeting, July 24th. The motion is as follows. The council received the Committee of the Whole report from its meeting held July 24, 2023, and hereby approve the recommendations pertaining to the staff reports listed below and as contained within the report as presented. 1. PRC 2023-04, Collingwood Arts Center Feasibility Study, Phase 3 Proposal. 2. CCS 2023-04, Agreement for the Early Termination of Georgian Triangle Humane Society Lease. And 3. CAO 2023-11, Sustainable Development Goals, Foundation to Community-Based Strategic Plan, and Downtown Master Steering Committee. There were other items that we dealt with at that Committee of the Whole, but they'll be put forward to our September 11 regular scheduled meeting. So I'm looking for a mover and a seconder, please. Deputy Mayor Fryer, Councillor Jeffrey. Would anyone like to pull anything on this of these three matters? Okay, all those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is 6.2.1, PRC 2023-03, Community Center Feasibility, Regional Consideration. The motion that's before us is as follows, that staff report PRC 2023-03, Community Center Feasibility, Regional Consideration be received, and that council directs staff to collaborate with staff from the town of the Blue Mountains regarding a blending of resources to accomplish a feasibility assessment that incorporates both municipalities' needs. Could I have a mover and a seconder to get this on the floor, please? Councillor Houston, Councillor Perry. Who would like to start the discussion on this? Councillor Baines.
I was not in attendance for this meeting. I did watch it virtually, though. And I've been speaking with Councillor Potts about the receptivity, if you will, of the town of the Blue Mountains in regard to this. And I'm open to continuing with a discussion. Is there a cost for this consultation, or is it merely between staff and staff?
I think this might be a question for Director Culver, please.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. The cost indicated in the report on behalf of the town of Collingwood is $100,000 upset limit, which would be matched upon acceptance by town of Blue Mountain if they also choose to partner.
Thank you. Sorry, I missed that.
Go ahead, Councillor. Yeah.
So thank you, Mayor Hamlin. So I know that Director Culver sent out some confirming emails today to questions with respect to this file, noting most particularly, which was helpful for me, that the intent of this wasn't to come up with a joint project between the municipalities, but rather to join resources to get a feasibility study toward the needs of each of our municipalities and see where the results come to that would inform a future decision. And if I've worded that incorrectly, I'm sure Director Culver will tell me. But so toward that end, I'm prepared to support moving forward with this. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin, and I will speak to it because I had recused myself at the last meeting. I consider regional approaches, if appropriate, to be extremely important as we move forward with major project considerations. Trying to keep long-term in mind is what I'm doing at that time. So I look at this particular matter as what would be done if we were a region. And on the surface, it appears that a regional study would be undertaken. But I also look at it as we aren't a region. Therefore, we have separate governance situations, and that is a concern for me from the perspective of how exactly would a regional facility function. When we were considering the Arts Center last meeting, Mr. Rowe, one who provided his experience suggestions, made one that governance models should be included in that study. I would see that as being even more applicable for the regional community center report. But in this case, that is going to directly, it's going to directly involve two municipal governments. And that appears to me to be a complication and at the very least more time consuming. Therefore, based on the concerns outlined, I'm not going to support a combined regional study. I do hope, though, and I recognize that Director Culver indicated, there will be an attempt to keep communication channels open for dialogue between Collingwood and Town Blue Mountains about each of the studies, but it may not be achievable. And that the sharing of information can be done, if it can be, on a timely basis. So both municipalities working separately, but achieving the best overall. So as I said, I will not be in support of the motion.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead, Councillor Ring.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I too have some concerns. I'm excuse me. I know the explanation that this isn't joint, but I think if we're going to spend all the money we've got allotted in our budget for a feasibility study that's not just pertaining to Collingwood, and we're going to compare notes after, I don't think it's money well spent. I said this is the third crack we've had at trying to get a multi-use recreational facility in Collingwood, and I think we've got to do it right this time. As Deputy Mayor just alluded to, I think it's only going to confuse the situation, prolong the situation. I think if we allotted the money at budget time for a Collingwood feasibility study, I think that's where we should spend the money. If we had known at the time that it wasn't necessarily all going to go towards just exclusively to Collingwood feasibility study, I'm not sure how the vote would have went. So I mean, we voted in X number of dollars into a budget, and we're changing the rules after the fact. And I don't think that's right. I don't think that's good planning, and I don't think that's money well spent. I'd just like to touch on a few things. If we do want to continue on and think that we're going to continue on with shared resources or sharing ideas or even sharing costs with Town of the Blue Mountains, I went over their recreation master plan, which is only less than a year old, and one of the key points that really caught my eye was where they have interviews with key stakeholders, and some of the comments I'm getting from their report, mainly from the public, is I think we're going to spend a lot of, just personal opinion, I could be wrong, we're going to spend a lot of time on a feasibility study with them to find out that once we get to the personal consultations or public consultations, that it might not be a good idea as far as the residents of Town of the Blue Mountain go. And I don't want to speak for Town of Collingwood either. Maybe it won't be here either. Just if I may, I'd just like to touch on a few things that are in that master plan, and this is under the title of Provisions for Recreational Facilities, Amenities, and Services, hasn't kept pace with municipal growth. And the first comment I'd like to make is, in this is quoting the report, is many interview participants suggest that an ideal location for a recreation facility would be in an existing community hub area, such as west of Thornbury, where there's a larger population to serve. And then later on in the paragraph, it says, another said, in order to attract more viable partners, the multi-use facility be located closer to Meaford than closer to Collingwood. So, I mean, they're publicly stating they would rather go west. Is this going to hold up things in the future? Another comment that I would like to make here is, inaccessible, exclusive, multi-purpose facility is overdue. Headline is this: interview respondent said that a multi-purpose facility should be close to a main traveling corridor such as Highway 26. And again, in that same paragraph, it says, some feel that it would be nice if the facility was near or easier access by kids and schools and close to local businesses that would benefit from increased traffic to and from the facility. So now they want it right downtown Thornbury. And later on, they said any multi-use facility must provide a variety of components for an active community and give equal opportunities for all ages of stakeholders. There should be youth programs and support, and even a youth center. You should be part of the planning process as well as a facility that is attractive to families, that will be an incentive for more residents moving to our area rather than to locate in Collingwood. Interviewees suggested that both indoor and outdoor amenities are important and should be built in phased approach, starting with the most needed and highest priority components first and adding additional features as capital becomes available. A huge center may not be necessary or realistic. So I'm just taken from comments, so these are interviews done by their own citizens. Are we going to get anywhere with sharing feasibility studies with Town of Blue Mountains at this time? So that's all I have.
Okay, thank you for your thoughts. Oh, thank you. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Mayor. Just following up again on Councillor Jeffrey's opening comments. This is not a collaboration meant to come up with a regional community center. It's a collaboration to determine our individual needs and whether there's an opportunity to collaborate to the benefit of both municipalities. I see that as being very different outcomes, unless I've completely misread this report. And even if we come out of this study and determine that there are no commonalities, we are still going to be able to come up with information about our own particular needs. And that is going to inform our future actions for this municipality. Further to that, the director has flagged that there are efficiencies and cost savings in undertaking this study jointly. And there is also potential for upper tier support based on regional collaboration. Ultimately, and even in the words of the deputy mayor, we are a region. We need to act like a region. And those are my comments. I will be voting in support of this staff report.
Councillor Potts.
Thanks, Mayor Hamlin. Maybe through you, a question for Director Culver. With this feasibility study, if being done jointly, will this also accomplish a feasibility study for the town of Collingwood itself, or do we need to dump more money into our own feasibility study? Will this kind of take care of both at the same time?
Through you, Mayor, the intent of the collaborative approach was to accomplish what we would accomplish on our own, but with an understanding of what the regional impacts and influences would be in investing in any recreation assets over the course of the two municipalities. So effectively, we would be accomplishing our own feasibility study at the same time. We would have the data we need in order to support what comprises a future build in Collingwood.
Any follow-up?
No, that's good. Thanks.
Deputy Mayor?
For letting me just do a follow-up. I didn't catch anywhere where it referred to the fact that there would be opportunity for upper level funding. So I wondered if I could ask the question through you to Director Culver in that
Certainly.
regard.
Director Culver?
Thank you, Mayor. It's a bit of a guess on behalf of staff. When we go after upper tier funding, collaboration is often looked upon very, very favorably. So where multiple municipalities or multiple entities have shared resources or combined knowledge to make a pitch for upper tier funding, it's usually looked at favorably. So the comment I made in the report was sort of along those lines. It was the idea that if Town of Blue Mountains is and the Town of Collingwood are in collaboration, at a future point when both municipalities are concurrently approaching upper tier government looking for a lot of money to be dumped into this sub-region, that collaboration, that organization of information would know that they were making good investments versus competing for upper tier funding. So again, it's a bit of an instinctive response, but it's based on experience with upper tiers.
Just to follow up, if I may. So what you're talking about is actually if it's a case of where we're moving forward with something, but are you talking about it on a combined basis at that point in time, that there is actually a combined facility?
Go ahead.
So through you, Mayor, at this point, I'd have to say that's a premature assessment to make. I don't know what the feasibility study is going to yield. And that was sort of the premise behind the report as well, is that we need to have this information in order to understand what the best approach going forward. We know that whatever happens in the town of the Blue Mountains or whatever happened in Collingwood is going to have a reciprocal impact on the other community, because we know, for example, that town of Blue Mountain residents are using our facilities and vice versa. So we're looking at it to be kind of a broadly understood, well understood concept before we go and ask for upper tier support. At that point, depending on what it is we're asking for, we'll determine whether it's a collaborative approach across the subregion or whether it's independent approaches. But either way, again, based on experience only and instinct, it feels like we'll have done the right things to position ourselves well for upper tier support.
Councillor Baines?
Thank you, Your Worship. I've been back and forth on this issue. The money concerns me, but on the other hand, if the bulk of the money is spent on the Collingwood assessment, I'm pleased with that. In regards to the discussion with the town of the Blue Mountains, it would be a shame to go through this whole exercise, and I'm convinced by the director's comments, and not have turned that leaf, if you will, to confirm just exactly what the town of the Blue Mountains' intentions were. It would almost, in my opinion, be a waste of money to do all our work, all these resources for our own assessment, and not have found out yes or no, in my opinion, what the town of the Blue Mountains is in this. And hopefully that could be determined with a 1 hour meeting. One might think between the staff, just to say, let's be clear here, because if we close the door on this, it affects you as much as it affects us for years to come. But having said all that, I'm prepared to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor
Thank you very much. I'm having a hard time even contemplating and supporting it, and I'm grateful that Director Culvers has tried to explain that. But to me, we're like, why does it make any sense then if we're going to be two separate entities and we're putting $100,000 in towards the feasibility study, and apparently they're willing to do the same? We're not going to have two separate feasibility studies. So, I mean, like, why would we just not move forward with our own? And the collaboration part of it, I've been involved in, well, not the arena part of it, but a lot of the things I've done over the last 40 years involved arenas and recreation centers, and you're saying that the government, big government bodes well to collaboration, and I could be wrong, but I know of probably 100 different recreation centers that I've heard of since I've been involved that are on their own. So, I mean, could you give me some examples of where collaborations worked, where two municipalities have regionally made the decisions on their facilities?
Go ahead.
So through you, Mayor, I actually can't give you an example of where two municipalities have collaborated around a multi-use rec facility or a community center. And I think in the report, I even indicate that it's an unusual circumstance. But I think what we've been trying to present is the upside. And again, I've said this in the committee meeting, and I'll say it again, is staff are just looking for direction in this. We felt by virtue of what the both master plans has said that it was something that had to be asked and decided upon at a council level, and staff will pursue whatever direction council provides. So we're not fighting for a cause here. I think that the logic that we've been looking at is that these are two very, very close communities. They're related to each other in so many ways. There are other examples of other communities that are looking at not rec centers, but other assets where they say, I shouldn't replicate this asset in my community because I know it's 5 minutes away in the adjoining community. I'm loath to sort of mention them because I need to do some research to make sure what I was saying was accurate, but I know of it anecdotally, and I know that it exists. Again, it's really where we're drawing the logic from, comes from the idea that, and I'll use the pool because the pool is an obvious example. It was mentioned in the Town of the Blue Mountains staff report, master plan in that it was something that was highly desirable in the town of the Blue Mountains. If they were to invest in a pool, we know that'll have an impact on the audience that our current pool takes on. It could have an impact on whether we consider a pool within our own multi-use rec facility, in other words, replacing the pool we have. It could have an impact on the business case in our pool. You're absolutely right that we can continue to dialogue and share, and we have a great relationship with Town of the Blue Mountains staff. It's really about collecting that data and knowing that it's synergistic, knowing that that data comes from the same questions and the same sources, and it really becomes viable data to help us make decisions. That's what it's about. It doesn't mean that we won't end up doing what we would do on our own. It just means that we'll know more going forward. And symbolically, it also understands us as a region. It understands us that we have, that one sneezes and the other one gets the cold kind of thing. So that's where the logic was behind the idea. In terms of examples, I don't know of another example where a multi-use rec facility was collaboratively approached. But again, I'm not 100% sure that that's what we're talking about here yet either. I don't know that we're talking about one facility. In fact, I would be very surprised if we ended up with that being an outcome of the feasibility study. I actually think this is really just about organizing recreational assets across two municipalities so that we work together and understand what the needs of our community and we're not replicating services.
Thank you.
Follow up if I may. And that's exactly what the point I'm trying to make. Don't get me wrong. Whatever's going to get the municipality a multi-use center facility, then I'm all for it, because nobody wants one any better, more than I do. But it's a time thing. If it seems like we'll go through this whole thing and then realize that maybe it wasn't a good idea. I mean, if it comes to that and it's the best approach, then that's fine. But I still think that we know we're definitely going to have one facility within our municipality if we go on and do our own feasibility study. We've had two previous to that. Why was regional never brought up then? What's changed with the Town of the Blue Mountains that we want to kind of join forces? I think if we're going to each commit $100,000 a piece, there's going to be more in a little bit than just sharing information. There's no point in it as far as I'm concerned. I think we're doing it backwards. I think we should do our feasibility study first, and part of that feasibility study should tell us that we can't do this on our own. You should collaborate with somebody else. I would think that that's what we would get from that feasibility study. And if at that point, then let's talk to them. But if we spend the money and find out it wasn't a good idea, now we got to spend another $100,000 and do our own. It just adds time to the project. It's not going to be done overnight as it is, but the longer we keep doing studies and like stuff outside of just concerned on what we're going to do for the citizens of Collingwood, then it's just going to take that much longer to get something in the ground.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Perry, did you wish to add to your thoughts?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Hamlin. Just a couple of concerns or comments. Thank you, Director Culver, for the report. I read the report a couple of times and I was trying to decide which way I want to go with this, and credit to you because you didn't sway me one way or another. So I'm totally not totally on the fence. I'm leaning toward no on this, but a couple of the concerns I have are, so Town of Blue Mountains, we have a joint study. Town of Blue Mountains say, for instance, to use your quote, say they have a rock climbing gym and then we have a couple more rinks, just basic terms. My whole view with a community, a MRF, is that it's all encompassing. So if there are kids, for instance, that say, to use your quote, want to rock climb, I would love, my vision is that they can ride their bikes to go to a rock climbing gym. And most kids are not going to want to ride all the way to Thornbury to go rock climbing or whatever else it may be. So those are the concerns I have. I would love to see it regionally. Locally or in our municipality. Along with what Deputy Mayor Fryer says, I would love to see something like this looked into with a multicultural center more, because that to me is more a regional build than a MRF. So those are just my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a few questions then. In terms of the timing for completion of a feasibility study, Director Culver, I'm wondering whether we do it on our own or in combination with the town of Blue Mountains. How will this affect, in your view, the time to complete such a study?
Thanks, Mayor Hamlin. So we've, again, I'm always loath, especially after 9 years in Collingwood and working on multiple projects, to sort of start putting deadlines and timelines on things. But I will say that we have theorized and surmised that in either case, a feasibility assessment would take somewhere between 6 and 9 months. The idea behind that is that you need to kind of, I believe you need to look at the seasonality, the winter-summer flow, and I think that different questions are asked at different times in order to get meaningful responses. But that's sort of what we've imagined, and in coordination with the staff at the town of Blue Mountains, they've agreed that that would be the same timeline we'd be doing, looking at collaboratively as well. So we don't believe it would take extra time. It would be roughly the same amount.
And in terms of the funding, we know how much is in our budget, and I think you told us how much was in the town of Blue Mountains budget in some correspondence. Do you see cost savings for us in doing this jointly, or is it just a matter of having all the information?
So the approved budget by council in the 2023 budget was $125,000 for the project. We set an upset limit of $100,000, and Town of Blue Mountains has agreed to match that, or at least at the staff level has agreed to match that. Again, in collaboration, we've assessed that we don't believe it will be more than $200,000 to conduct the assessment. Until we go through an RFP process, we really don't know for sure. So I have a hard time characterizing it as savings, but we are projecting less for a joint study than what was budgeted by both together.
Okay, and another question I have is there's been concern expressed here about maybe wasting time through a feasibility study and trying to decide what facility should go where, and that no one will ever want a facility perhaps outside of their community or where they can bike to. Will the feasibility study decide locations of facilities, in your view?
So this is a really big question. And I don't know that I'm going to give a very, very adequate answer. The challenge for Collingwood is that we don't own the land at this point. So there are processes underway by staff looking at different possibilities for land acquisition, priorities, et cetera. Council's aware of this. And within that, there are concepts around where a multi-use rec facility should be or could be. And that's the goal behind that, is to get us as prepared as possible for what the future will bring. So the location piece is a little bit different than it was for the Art Center, for example, because we aren't talking about lands that we actually own. We're talking about sort of areas. There still is the acquisition piece to accomplish, and I can't honestly at this point, I think it would be irresponsible to put a prediction on that, truthfully.
But is that an outcome of the feasibility study? Like, would that be a goal of it, to decide where certain facilities should go? Or is it a phased approach? For example, here's all the data, this is what these community needs are? Or what would be the conclusion of the feasibility study?
Through you, Mayor. So I think that the feasibility study should tell us what the community wants, what is the right and smartest ideas to put into place, knowing that we can't be all things to all people, but that there is a responsible pathway forward, looking after the community's finances as well as the long-term future of the community for recreation. I think in developing the componentry, you're developing ideas around what is the size of property that you need, which can help to dictate location. You can think about what other combinative combined effects you might want to get with that kind of a property, such as, do you need to add baseball diamonds? Do you need to add tennis courts? Do you need to add something outside? So there are a lot of reasons that will help, I think, us to narrow down what the location opportunities are in Collingwood. I don't know for sure that it's going to say an address on a street.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. This is a tough one because here we are with our director, of course, calling it a subregion, and he's quite right, right? So many things that we're doing these days, we're looking to our adjoining municipalities to do it better. And I would say the governance structure hasn't caught up with the needs, but that is certainly somewhere I am not going in terms of the governance structure discussion. Instead, I have always been a big proponent of doing it with our adjoining municipalities if it makes sense to do so. And I have a feeling this is just one of those, in my view, where we know we've got 26,000 people plus another 4,000 of part-time residents, most of whom want rec facilities. And we know the town of Blue Mountains is pushing 9,000 people, 10,000 people. I mean, our rec center is not going to be in the town of Blue Mountains. So I am not too worried about that. I think that if we can, at this point, gather data and see what are the needs and where, who's best equipped to provide them. And if the whole world doing rock climbing is in the town of Blue Mountain, that's an easy one because they also have outdoor parks where that can happen. But I'm of the view at this time that we should try and get the data together on what's needed here in our community and in the town of Blue Mountains. And I wouldn't be surprised to find some discussion before this is finished with Clearview, because their residents use all our facilities as well. And there's no sense us pretending that we're an island unto ourselves. I don't want to see this project held up in order to accommodate any other municipalities' needs, and I'm satisfied at this time that wouldn't be the case. So I'll be supporting this. Thank you. Okay, now to vote. So, did I read this in? Yeah, and we got a mover and a seconder. Okay, so we're just going to vote. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that carries. The next item on the agenda is the long-awaited release of draft 2 of our official plan update. And before I read in the recommendation, I should ask for a presentation. And so I'll turn this over to Director Valentine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. We do have our lead consultant here today, Mr. Ron Palmer, but I will take a few moments to add some introductory remarks. As the Mayor certainly mentioned, at this special meeting of Council, we have the much anticipated release of the second draft of the new Town of Collingwood official plan. This iteration of the document is a result of nearly a year of work, and it's almost to the day, actually, since the release of the first draft. And prior to that time, as you'll note in the report, there was extensive background research, community consultation, and inputs from many internal and external stakeholders, as well as agencies, organizations, and the general public that helped to get us here to this point today. We'd like to take an opportunity to thank everyone who has put in time and effort into this project, and we hope to maintain this high level of engagement that we've seen so far through our next steps. If you are watching today and you are new to the conversation, an official plan is the overall policy framework that guides growth and land use decisions within the municipality. It is a statutory document, which means it does have legal effect. It's required by the province, and it does provide high-level direction on land use planning and built form to a specified time horizon, which is typically 20 years but can be beyond. Official plans address the tenets of sustainable development, and they cover considerations related to environmental protection, social well-being, and economic vitality. And that's all within the context of safe, healthy, compact, and complete communities. The Planning Act does require municipalities to review and revise their official plans, and it's on 5 to 10 year timing cycles, depending on the specifics of the municipality. And the purpose of that overall review is to ensure that the plan is consistent or conforms with provincial interests, policies, and plans. And most municipalities also use this opportunity to update policies to address changing local conditions, priorities, and to move towards the community's overall vision. So today does represent an important step in this overall update process, where the policies that build on the feedback that we received from the first draft, and if council agrees, this second draft of the official plan would be released as the basis of the next step, which would be beginning our formal legislatively required conversation with the community. To date, as noted, extensive outreach with stakeholders has already been undertaken, and that is above and beyond the requirements of the Planning Act and was certainly well worthwhile to shape the document that you see before you today. I think you will hear from our consultant that this outpouring of community response to the official plan has been one of the greatest that he has seen in his career to date. And you've likely heard me say this before, and I do think it bears mentioning again, that this draft is not perfect. It's intended to be a springboard to the next phase of the project and will act as the continued discussion with the community, stakeholders, and importantly, our Indigenous groups that have a historic or current interest in our geography. We do anticipate that there will be further refinements in response to what we do here over the summer and into the early fall. And I would also underscore that the release of this draft was delayed due to significant shifts at the provincial level with respect to policy and legislation. But I want to emphasize as well that the work did not stop. With the draft that you see before you having undergone significant edits in order to align with these province-wide framework changes. And our consultant will certainly take you through the details of some of those in his presentation with you today. So while the conversation will continue today with council, we recognize that this is a substantial document, it's information dense, and it does take folks time to review and digest it. So we are recommending that there be a gap of at least 6 weeks between today, should council agree to release the document, and when we schedule the formal consultation touch points that are outlined in the report. For those touch points, we will, of course, provide notice as required by the Planning Act, but we will also use a number of supplementary communication channels like the town's website, social media, radio, Engage Collingwood, and our courtesy notice lists and newsletters that we have on file. So to further help us with the understanding of the document, we have our lead consultant that's been assisting with the preparation of the official plan review. This is Ron Palmer of the Planning Partnership. And he will remind us where we've been on this journey. He will introduce the significant changes between draft 1 and draft 2 in response to public comments and provincial shifts that are being proposed. And he'll walk us through the highlights of the document, recognizing that there are some evolving topics that might not be fully addressed in the second draft. And finally, he will help us chart a course for the next steps. We want to ensure that there is time remaining for your questions, council, and any initial commentary that you may have. We have a number of staff here that can assist with answering questions, but I do want to notably highlight Senior Planner Wukash, who's next to me here today. Though many staff members have put quite a lot of effort into this document, along with the stellar consulting team, Senior Planner Wukash has contributed significantly and should be able to help us with any questions. And finally, Ron, before turning it over to you, we would also highlight that as part of the resolution before you, there was a handful of redesignation requests for individual properties that hadn't been previously dealt with through council decision. Council had endorsed a criteria which we applied to determine whether those requests were major, meaning that they should be dealt with through a separate official plan amendment process, or minor, meaning they could be combined in with this overall review. So those recommendations for each of the individual sites are in the staff report and motion today. So thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to provide those remarks. And if you concur, we will hand over the floor to Mr. Palmer.
Yes, thank you for that introduction. And over to you, Mr. Palmer.
Thank you. Is this on? Sounds like it is. Great. Through you, Madam Mayor and members of council, this is great to be here in person. I'm going to give you an overview of everything that we've been doing over the last year, which has been a lot. So we're going to start with the next slide, and I'll give you a bit of an outline. I'm going to talk about where we are in the work program, highlights of what we've heard through the stakeholder process, and that includes conversations with council, conversations with staff, agencies, the public, and of course, the development community here in Collingwood. I'm going to give you an overview of what is included in the official plan, and then we'll talk about next steps, which Director Valentine briefly touched on. Next slide. Before we even did draft one, we did a fair bit of public consultation. It was very valuable. It was really well attended. Lots of great input. You have a really well-engaged, passionate community here in Collingwood. Seems there's a lot of planners who have retired here. And they've been helping me very much. We did discussion papers. We did a what we heard report. We've met with technical advisory committee, department heads, and then we prepared an options and recommendations report, and then we prepared draft one. Next slide. So we are at the end of phase 5, and we move into phase 6 should council agree to release this document today, and getting closer and closer to a plan that is adoptable and approvable and supportable. Hopefully by the end of this year. Next slide, please. This draft is better than draft 1. It's better than draft 1 because we've heard such tremendous opinion, commentary, editorial advice, direction, a little bit more knowledge of the town of Collingwood as we move forward. We've talked about historically how we dealt with the comments from the public and from the development community, and those are all identified in a matrix. A significant piece, I think a little bit bigger than the official plan itself, but very important topics that we touched on. Growth management, of course, is fundamental to this plan, although the role of growth management is changing through provincial legislation changes. We talked about housing, including affordable, attainable, assisted housing, climate change, 15-minute community, Bill 23, which was something that came out just after we produced draft 1, natural heritage system, transportation, and particularly how to deal and grapple with 3rd Street. And then we received a whole host of site-specific commentary. That was primarily from the development community looking for adjustments to the policy frameworks that exist today, some of which we absolutely agreed with, some of which we did not. Nonetheless, all of that commentary is extremely useful to me and to staff in preparing what we call draft 2. Since the release of draft 1, we also now have a municipal comprehensive review and official plan amendment 7 from the county of Simcoe. That helps us understand long-term planning for growth in terms of population employment projections, land needs assessments, and so on. And also, more recently, we received Bill 97 and a new provincial planning statement, not yet in force, but as we understand it's coming. We don't know if it's this fall or early next year, but we know that it's coming. So what we've tried to do in draft 2 is include everything that we think is appropriate to be both in conformity with the growth plan which will go away when Bill 97 and the new PPS are enacted, as well as being consistent with the new PPS. So it's a bit of a tightrope, but I think we've come up with a pretty good strategy, retaining the really positive elements of the growth plan because we thought they represented good planning and were in the best interests of the town of Collingwood. The other thing that we've added into this plan is the minister's zoning order and how we've dealt with that in terms of giving it the identification that is appropriate, keeping in mind that some of the work is still to be done. Next slide, please. So some of the major changes, again, from commentary, from provincial legislation, and from ongoing conversations with staff and with council. Growth management, we are planning horizon for this plan in conformity with Official Plan Amendment 7 and the Municipal Comprehensive Review from the county is now 2051. One of the things we decided to keep in this plan are the targets for intensification in terms of the amount of growth that is expected within the existing built-up area of the town, as well as greenfield density targets, which are specifically intended to promote a range and mix of housing types in the greenfield parts of this community. We are aware that the definition for affordable housing is going to be removed from the current provincial policy statement. So we've looked at the housing section and tried to refine it, but still maintain the intent to achieve various types of affordable, attainable, and assisted house forms. A fair number of changes related to employment areas. We've adjusted the terminology, we've shifted the onus for impact mitigation, and refined the list of permitted and prohibited land uses. Strategic growth areas, primarily the downtown, here Ontario Street, First Street, and Highway 26. We've made some minor adjustments, include a density target, and permit a host of appropriate compatible land uses. The rural agricultural area, that has been renamed in recognition that it is now, as it has been, always been part of the settlement area of Collingwood. Renamed it in growth management. However, it retains its rural and rural residential designations. Eventually, we expect it will be necessary for future community development, but there is a significant process to go through in order to achieve that. And that includes secondary plans, as well as ensuring that sufficient sewer, water, and transportation facilities exist to accommodate that change. Transportation, interestingly, we didn't make a ton of changes. However, we are now conforming with both the 2012 and 2019 transportation studies. We do talk about a 15-minute community, and just to take a second on that, a 15-minute community means that you can access by walking a number of daily needs, going to school, going to a park, shopping, healthcare facilities. What's important about that is a 15-minute walk is a walk of about 1.2 kilometers. And I haven't done the actual analysis, but I would expect that about 90% of Collingwood today is a 15-minute community. Just by putting that 1,200 meter radius around all of the identified facilities. The intent is the ability to walk or bike to a number of daily activities, assisting with climate change and promoting a healthy population. Gets me to climate change. Again, not a lot of support in terms of policy. In fact, the province seems to be walking back a bit on the needs of climate change. However, we have continued to promote climate change as an appropriate community building initiative. We've enhanced the urban forest policies. And as I mentioned before, we've included the MZO lands in our understanding of growth potential. We have prepared a policy that recognizes existing development approvals and applications that have been submitted and deemed complete prior to the adoption of this plan. And of course, that comes with a host of mapping refinements, making sure everything works together and that we have captured what we think is the most appropriate urban structure and land use distribution within the town of Collingwood. Sorry, I went a little too fast without switching slides, but we can jump over a couple. All right, let's go to the next one. Something that I always want to remind council is that in this plan, part of our job to find the right balance, the regulatory elements of the plan, the management elements, and the facilitating elements of the plan. And that's all about wording and making sure that we're hitting a balance. We're not being too regulatory and we're not being too permissive. So the words in this plan matter. It's important to note that specific words are used in specific instances on purpose. And as you continue to review the document, keeping in mind the importance of the wording, we're happy to continue the conversation of what should be regulatory, what should be management focused, and what should be facilitative. Part of that is linked back to legislation and what you're allowed to do versus what you're permitted to consider. Next slide. Just going through the table of contents, in Chapter 1, we talk about engagement with Indigenous peoples and what the purpose of the official plan is. In Chapter 2, we have a vision statement and we have community values. It's important to note that we've included the vision from the strategic plan, but augmented that with a vision statement that was developed at the beginning of this process with members of the public. The vision statement that applies to this plan and all the associated community values did come directly from your population through that process. They're a fundamental underpinning of the plan. It gives us direction on the types of topics that the residents are interested in as they affect land use planning in the town of Collingwood. Some of those topics are included in Chapter 3, which we entitled Building a Successful Community. A whole host of topics that are town-wide applicable, including housing options, economy, healthy communities, design, cultural heritage, and sustainability. These things are all, of course, linked together and directly link back to the vision and community values established. Chapter 4 is growth management. That has changed a fair bit because of the anticipated removal of the growth plan and the new PPS, but also in consideration of the work done by the County of Simcoe, as they are today responsible for allocating growth to the town of Collingwood. Importantly, the emphasis on the growth projections is they are no longer limits to development, but they are minimum targets to be achieved. That's a very specific and important change, and that will have impacts on how growth management occurs in Collingwood for the next 20 to 30 years. Next slide. Chapter 5 is really the meat and potatoes of this official plan. It's the land use designations. Every property in Collingwood is given a land use designation, and it talks about what the permitted land uses are and what the policies for development are on those properties. We have policies that apply town-wide. We have policies that apply to the residential communities, the strategic growth areas, which are the corridors and the downtown, the employment areas, the long-term community area outside of the built boundary, importantly, the natural heritage system, and then a host of site-specific official plan policies that have accumulated over time. Chapter 7, implementation and interpretation. That's intended to empower the municipality to utilize other tools that are found within the Planning Act, as well as to talk about how official plan amendments will be dealt with over time, what the zoning bylaw will do, and how lines on a map and policies are to be interpreted as you read through the document. We have a number of schedules, which I'll show you in a minute. We have a growth management schedule, land use plan, natural heritage system, active transportation, and transportation. In this version of the document, we've included all of the appendices, and there's 3 of them. Appendix 1 is related to all your cultural heritage resources, including the Heritage Conservation District in downtown Collingwood. Appendix 2 talks about the vision for the MZO as it was presented to council and to the public. And Appendix 3 includes all of the background information that was utilized to establish the natural heritage system within the town of Collingwood. Next slide. As I mentioned, we did prepare a vision. I'm not going to read this, but certainly this was developed in collaboration with the public. They didn't write the sentences for us, but they certainly gave us the words that they wanted to see and how they felt Collingwood should evolve into the future. A couple of really important components: live in a healthy and complete community, be inclusive, accessible, compact, multimodal transportation, promote and enhance the waterfront and the downtown, economically successful, and protect cultural heritage resources. Next slide. Had 10 community values, also developed in collaboration with the public. We wanted to make sure that we hit all of the primary topics that they identified in our conversations and through a survey that was carried out. As you can see, there are 10, and they cover a host of topics that relate back to the vision. Natural heritage and sustainability, vibrant downtown, economic development, conservation of cultural heritage resources, high quality urban design, range of land uses and housing options, compact development and intensification, healthy and connected community, enhanced local transit, and an enhanced active transportation network. These are all things that the town of Collingwood does, but now we're trying to put more emphasis through policy to improve Collingwood, to make Collingwood even better. Next slide. And I've mentioned these already, so I'm not going to go through them in any kind of detail, but we do have policy statements about each of these key topics. Everything is interrelated. Everything links back to the guiding values and the vision. Really important to make sure that the vision, the principles, the community, lost my phrasing here. Community values and the policy frameworks all link together That's important so that you can show when you're having a conversation about something how these are achieved development approval. Again, there's a host of them in terms of building a successful community, broad topics for sure, but certainly a policy framework that is intended to provide some guidance to council in future decision making. Next slide. Growth management, again, this was a fairly significant change through Bill 97 and the new PPS. But some of the principles that were in draft one remain. They're just slightly adjusted to match OPA 7 from the county and the terminology from the new PPS. Next slide. The growth management or urban structure map. And it's a fairly straightforward map that identifies areas, your strategic growth areas. They're in the, not sure what the colors are on the screen, but they're pink in color. Yellow are existing residential communities. The purples are employment areas. Orange is the greenfield residential communities. Those are already, they already have status in terms of future residential development and are considered appropriate for future development in the time horizon of this plan. The natural heritage system is identified, and as is the future community area, which, as I said before, retains its important rural and rural residential designations and is not necessarily required for development in the time horizon of this plan. Next slide. So, again, the nuts and bolts, the meat and potatoes of this plan are the land use designations. They're subdivided into the primary categories identified in the growth management schedule. So the growth management schedule is a simplified version. The land use schedule subdivides all these various elements into individual land uses that provide individual policy frameworks for each. So we have residential communities. That includes existing and future neighborhoods. That also includes major institutional parks and open space designations. Strategic growth areas, which is the downtown, and we have 2 mixed-use corridors and the regional commercial district. The employment areas, we have prestige employment and general employment, one that is intended to integrate with other land uses better. General employment is really our heavier industrial uses. We deal with the waste disposal area. Again, the future community area is subdivided into rural and rural residential designations. The natural heritage system is identified based on all of the information in Appendix 3. Importantly, minor adjustments to the natural heritage system can be accommodated subject to an environmental impact study without an amendment to the official plan. Major changes require an amendment. We've articulated in that section a host of other elements related to natural hazards, endangered species, species at risk, and source water management. And then, of course, there's area-specific policies which are carried forward from the existing official plan. Next slide. So the more highly articulated map looks like this. And as I said, under each of the primary identifiers on Schedule 1, this subdivides those primary areas into multiple designations, each having their own policy framework, including a list of permitted land uses. So this is the most complicated schedule in the plan, and it's probably the most important schedule in the official plan. Next slide. This is the natural heritage map, And it includes the environmental protection designation, which is in dark green. It includes sub-watershed boundaries, including special policy area for the Pretty River flood fringe. We identify an adjacent land overlay, and that is in the light green. The purpose of the adjacent land overlay is to trigger the requirement for an environmental impact study. Any development within that overlay doesn't mean you can't develop. It just means you have to make sure that the development does not create any negative impact on the natural heritage system. So this is a fairly robust approach to the protection of the natural heritage system, which is a requirement of the existing provincial policy statement, which has not changed in any significant way in the proposed new provincial planning statement. Next slide. This slide identifies all the area-specific policies that you have within your plan. As I said, these are typically a carryover from your existing official plan and includes some pretty specific policies that apply only to those pieces of property. We are going to continue to work with these landowners to see if those specific policies are still relevant going forward. And if they are not, we will take them out. However, it's important for the landowners to have the opportunity to think about whether or not they still like and need the policies that they've earned historically. Next slide. Transportation is really focused on supporting a more multimodal transportation system that includes the accommodation of the automobile, as well as the accommodation of cycling and other modes of non-motorized transportation. And of course, pedestrian traffic is crucial to this plan as well. The goal is to make sure that we are creating an urban structure that is supportive of future transit investment. That, of course, is a cornerstone element of a response to a changing climate. It's also good planning. Municipal service infrastructure, again, this part is not tremendously different than your current official plan. However, it's really focused on making sure you have efficient municipal infrastructure related to water supply, sewage disposal, and storm drainage. These are all very important elements going forward. It gives you the opportunity to start thinking about the future in terms of what you need to accommodate growth to 2051 and beyond. Yes, and the existing PPS do allow municipalities to plan for infrastructure beyond the planning horizon for land use planning. That's important because it takes a long time to get approval for new facilities, and it takes a long time to generate the revenue to build them. Next slide. This slide identifies the active transportation systems. So this is trails, sidewalks, both existing and proposed from your various transportation master plans and active transportation plan. Next slide. This is the transportation plan, not tremendously different than the existing one because it reflects work that has been carried out in prior transportation master plans. Next slide. The last two sections of the official plan are implementation and interpretation. Implementation really talks about working with the upper tier opportunities. We're not sure when the County of Simcoe will lose its planning authority, but if they are no longer your approval authority. The approval authority will become the province. It also identifies various other tools included in the Planning Act that will be important for the town to use as you implement the principles and objectives of this official plan. Interpretation, as I mentioned earlier, it's really how do you read this plan? What do some of the words mean? What if there's a conflict in where the line is located on a map, etc. The goal is that interpretation can become very consistent as the plan is reviewed and used over time. Next slide. As I said, we did include all 3 appendices in this version of the plan. Cultural heritage resources, that includes a map and the register of all your designated cultural heritage resources. Appendix 2 includes some excerpts from the presentation with respect to the MZO, really focused on what the vision was as it was presented to council and to the public. And Appendix 3 includes all of the mapping and information that was used to establish the environmental protection designation. Next slide. The last one. Our next steps, assuming that council agrees version to the public, is that after today we hope to circulate the plan to the public, all the stakeholders, public, development, industry, all of the review agencies that are continue to be involved in this plan, as well as the Indigenous community. Hoping to send it out for review for about 6 weeks, and then set a date for a public open house and public meeting, hopefully at some point in September or October of this year. After the open house and public meeting, we would then prepare another comment matrix and make further changes official plan, resulting in a final draft. Final draft will come back to council for a recommendation for adoption, and we hope to do that before the end of this year. That I'm happy to try and answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your presentation and all your hard work on this. Much appreciated. So before I turn it over to council for questions, I'll read in our motion here that report P 2023-24 official plan update, release of draft 2 for public consultation dated July 31, 2023 be received, and that the recommendations contained herein for minor landowner redesignations be considered through the official plan update, whereas major landowner redesignation requests will require a standalone official plan amendment application in accordance with council-endorsed criteria, and that staff and the project team be directed to 1, schedule a statutory public open house and public meeting no earlier than 6 weeks after the release of draft 2 of the official plan to allow stakeholders the opportunity to digest materials and formulate responses. 2, undertake further outreach to Indigenous communities and groups with a current or historic interest in the geography of the town of Collingwood. And 3, after stakeholder input is received from the statutory public house and public meeting opportunities, and further clarity is received from the province on the status of the draft provincial planning statement, undertake any necessary updates to draft 2 of the official plan, and return to council with a final draft for consideration of adoption as soon as possible. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Potts, thank you, and Councillor Baines, thank you. Any questions? Councillor Ring.
Thank you very much, Mayor Hamlin. Through you to Ron. Just a question on, and I think you know where I'm going to come from because I think I asked you when we met. But anyways, on the Bill 97, the new PPS, provincial definition for attainable housing. I know what it is. It's 80% of the, as far as rentals go for the average market rental. But do we have to change our definition from affordable to attainable in our, or is that just, we have to comply with the provincial standards?
Good question. Over to you, Mr. Palmer.
You, Madam Mayor. Fantastic question. We're not exactly positive yet how the province expects a municipality to respond to this change. However, I would ask you to review the affordable housing section in the plan. We've done some rewriting.
Okay.
Absolutely attainable is defined as primarily delivered by the private sector and based on that 80% of average market rent. However, we've also included a definition of assisted housing, which the intent of that is to get deeper into the income cohorts to ensure that we're covering a broader spectrum of housing affordability generally in the town of Collingwood. So we're not sure what the province is going to allow us to do or not allow us to do. Please have a look at the amendments that we've made to this version of the plan and see if we're getting to where you need to get to.
Thank you.
Mind, you still don't have a tool to compel.
Follow up if I may. Just on, and I will, and I intend to study the new plan a little bit deeper. I'm just concerned, and I think with the definition more than anything. What we're trying to achieve here, we've got a task force in Collingwood that's for affordable. We use affordable, not attainable. It was the objective of that committee or that task force, and there's quite a big difference in the provincial definition of attainable and what we would like to see our definition of affordable to help the people in need in Collingwood, and maybe it's, if I read the thing, maybe you have covered that, and just it's just more of a title change than anything else. But I know in the first discussions we had, I felt that there was a real big difference between the provincial's idea of attainable housing and what we're trying to achieve here with affordable housing. And I just if we go by the 80% of the average market rental in Collingwood and consider that affordable, we're not going to meet the targets. We're the group of people that we're trying to, we're more on geared to their income than the market value. I mean, if we've got $2,200 for the average rental unit, we're still going to be close to $1,800, which is, there's a lot of people can't afford that either. So that's, I'll look further into it. I appreciate that. I know this isn't the final, and I was just wondering if we had to follow the provincial wording and definitions to the T. That's all.
Madam Mayor, just
Yes.
one point on that is that in the past, the test for the growth plan, conformity, test for the PPS, I'm just going to call it that, even though they changed the name of it. Different test. It's less onerous. So specific conformity with the new PPS is not required. So whatever the province would determine as being consistent with their approach would be acceptable.
I also want to add to that, because it's such an important point for our community, that for those of us who are going to be at the AMO conference, there's lots of, historically at least, a lot of MPPs there, and we'll see some ministers. We should all talk this up about the importance of affordable housing, because the province concluded some time ago that its goals for housing can be achieved through supply. And that doesn't address the needs in our community. So I think we have to share that loudly. Okay, who else has some questions? Councillor Jeffrey, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. No, I think this is, as the director has described, a great springboard for our community to re-engage on the second draft. Just really by way of comment, not really a question, some lessons learned during COVID and how it impacts what you're planning for your community. And one of the things I didn't read in here was taking care of rural and an understanding. A lot of people believe that food security is that food will always magically appear at the grocery store. And I think at COVID, we realized that doesn't happen. And it might be one of those collaborative situations for outside of Collingwood, but to partner with other communities. But I just think we stopped talking about food security and the ability to feed ourselves and the green space we're going to need for that. And we're going to get one kick at this. I think this is a pretty critical draft, official draft plan for us, and it'll be our last kick of the cat, I think, to protect that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Ron. In regard to tools to compel, I think is what you were saying, that there are a lack of those, that we do not have the ability or won't have the ability to compel. I'm thinking particularly back to the affordable housing file, and this council just got an unfavorable, I think everyone would agree, response from a OLT decision where council was not necessarily trying to compel, but suggests strongly as part of an outcome that a greater percentage of units would be provided. The commissioner did not see it that way. So as a newbie councillor, I'm kind of at a loss to say, how do we advance this agenda specifically if we can't use the official plan? And when we do try and take other avenues, we're unsuccessful at those. So I'm kind of frustrated to saying, what is it? What are the tools in our toolbox to try and, I suppose the word is compel developers to provide more affordable housing?
Go ahead.
Madam Mayor, that's a gigantic question.
I know, I'm sorry.
But I've been involved in this question 1996 when the province passed for the first time legislation that talked about affordable housing. It was called Land Use Planning for Housing. Lucky enough to be working with some older gurus, and we got retained by the minister to say, well, now that we've passed it, how do we implement it? You'll never find that report because it was never published. Part of the answer is supply. Part. Where we ended up was in the absence of a legislative tool, the reliance for the delivery of affordable housing was a concept they called intrinsic affordability. And this goes directly to your recent OLT decision, which I read. Intrinsic affordability is housing becomes more affordable when you promote density, because that reduces the per unit land cost, and when you build smaller units, because those cost less, or at least they have the propensity to cost less. And it was left at that. Never a tool provided to compel, and the onus became on the municipalities to simply promote density and smaller units. So we took out minimum unit sizes from zoning bylaws. We promoted medium and high density house forms in secondary plans. And that was the strategy. And it didn't particularly work because it's not the only solution that is necessary. Intrinsic affordability is part of a solution, not the whole solution. What is included in this plan so far is a different step towards the municipality's role in assisting the private sector or public sector partners in building affordable housing. So you don't have a tool except you have land, provide financial incentives, you can waive certain fees, and you can promote density, which this plan does. Issue of the smaller units is an interesting one. And after reading that OLT decision, I'm wondering if we could articulate a mix of housing size as a policy approach rather than simply, or in addition to, a mix of housing types. I think I might want to talk to your lawyer about the efficacy of that. But I think there's a grain of something there. So absolutely intrinsic affordability, at least on the density side, is in here. What you were trying to do would have been absolutely permitted under old Section 37 of the Planning Act, which of course they changed in Bill 23 to a different thing. So the bonus thing is kind of out of it. But, I think we can still think about avenues to explore, leverage the concept of intrinsic affordability even more. And of course, I'm hoping that the Affordable Housing Committee can think about the tools that are included in here and how the municipality might leverage those to work with the development community or other public sector partners to become much more directly involved in the solution. Have the opportunity to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Fryer?
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. I was thinking back when Director Valentine mentioned about the year of work, and it's really been longer. It's been a long effort. I sat right about where Mr. Palmer's sitting last year, interviewing with previous council for the vacant position, and the question was, what one achievement would you like to see if you became the member? And I said, the passing of the official plan. It's not happened in that time frame, and it's not for the lack of trying and work that has to go into it. It's rule changes that get thrown at you in the middle of it. But I really want to commend staff and the public and council's efforts because as stakeholders, we've all been working very, very hard on this. I'm pleased that this can now go out to the public in the form that it is. I think we've tried to address as much as possible the comments we've received. I know that your intention is to provide those comments in detail and response within the document, and I think that's tremendous. So the last thing I would like to say is Mayor Hamlin spoke about we really need to talk and talk when we're at AMO to the powers that be about these issues and that, and I think we talk about the fact that we can't compel because there is a tool, inclusionary zoning, that we don't have the ability to use, and maybe if there were appropriate times to use it in our area, we would be answering what the commissioner or member that ruled on the OOT said, which is affordable housing needs to be in particular locations. Well, then give us the ability to do that. And so I think that's the other message we need to keep putting forward to the provinces. Inclusionary zoning may be a tool that's necessary for even municipalities our size when it's appropriate. So again, I'm pleased with the document and the fact that it's going to get out to the public and we'll get more comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Nope. Okay. Believe it or not, I'm not going to ask a question. And she gets around the room applause. Okay. No, but thank you so much for this. I so much appreciate all the hard work that staff's done. And Nathan, I see you over there, and your firm as well, and you in particular, Mr. Palmer. So thank you. So now we'll vote on this. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you so much. Okay, so I think we'll just take a 10-minute break and then we'll come back and finish up our agenda. Thank you.
Good friend, Scott Pierce.
So.
Okay, I'll call our meeting back to order. We'll start with item 7.2, and the motion before us is with respect to the staff report on our Q2 financial results report. I obviously need another break. Good thing my holidays are coming. All right, over to you, Treasurer Quinlan.
Thank you, Your Worship. Maybe we just had too long of a break. Maybe that's what it was. So we, as staff, have prepared a report on the finances for the town to the end of the second quarter. This is just part of our routine reporting process. And just as a reminder, the information is based on internal financial statements, and it's based on the information known at this time. So the purpose of this report is to provide a review of the actual versus budget and a preliminary forecast to the end of the year. At this time, the town is in a surplus position, which is as is expected to be at this point, given that full taxes have been issued for 2023. So members of our community would have received their final tax bills at the end of June, early July. And generally what would be expected at this point for each department is that they should be at approximately 50% of their budgeted values. And on average right now, the town department expenditures currently sit at 47.9%, so slightly behind what we would have expected at this part in the year. But the overall budget, which is due mainly to the timing of some expenditures, such as some road maintenance and summer staffing as well. I'll also note that in Appendix A, the previous year's actual year-to-date amounts have been included as requested at the previous meeting where Q1 results were presented. And in addition to this, an in-depth salary review has been prepared as well and is included as Appendix C of the report. And then finally, on top of that, a very preliminary projection has also been included, which results in an expectation of a surplus of $238,000 for the 2023 year end. I'll note again that this is very preliminary, but it is representative of less than 0.5% of the total budgeted expenditures. And I'll just add, from a capital standpoint, at the end of Q2, $10.4 million has been spent so far of the $63.3 million budget, noting that the third quarter tends to be the most active in terms of construction activity. As an enhancement to the capital reporting this quarter, a progress report has been included as Appendix B.1 as well, which provides a greater amount of detail in terms of the progress of each project at this point in 2023. So thank you for your time, Your Worship, and I'm happy to address any questions or comments.
Okay, thank you. I'll read in the recommendation here that staff report T2023-17, 2023 Q2 financial report be received for information. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor Fryer, Councillor Baines, would there be any questions or comments? Councillor Jeffrey?
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. So thank you very much for the excellent report and the information. And I did have the opportunity to scan through. And one question that came up for me, while not materially significant, was in the capital process section, account 9134, to be specific. But what had happened is we budgeted, I thought maybe I was getting the columns mixed up, but we budgeted $10,000 for customer service software and spent $56,000. So my first questions were, does that exceed the CAO's spending capacity? And then number two, how are we out so much? So I did ask the treasurer ahead of time, and she had a response for me with respect to that. So.
Okay, go ahead, Treasurer.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Jeffrey. So first, the customer service software was intended to be completed in 2022, but in fact, the final billings and the actual staff, oh God, I can't think of the word, training, pardon me, was included in 2023. We did take the funds that were budgeted for this project in 2022 into reserves at the end of 2022. But because it was at the very last minute, it was not caught that the budgeted amount should have been carried forward as well. So that is an error in the budget, but certainly this has been funded through modernization funding and is covered as we did do the reserve transfer at the end of 2022 to cover that.
Follow up?
Yeah, thank you. So, and then my follow-up is as part of our discussion with the treasurer was that, in fact, in these situations, the CAO's spending limit isn't restricted to the 25,000 that is generally in other areas. So I guess through to the CAO or the clerk, what is our procedure on that? Just because of our responsibility with the budget, how much leeway is there? Like I said, that was one that's not really materially significant, but overall in a budget, how much leeway is there for those kind of changes within a capital project budget for the over and under and how it's dealt with within? I mean, it's one thing to keep staff within a budget, but that's a, whatever, $50-60 million capital budget. So how much over and under is there by project, and how would we apply that? And I think that's for the clerk or the CAO.
Okay, clerk
And I
comments?
did not have an opportunity to ask them that because
Certainly, and I would have to call up the bylaw that was recently passed, but I believe that there is flexibility that the CAO does have, as long as the amount does not exceed what budget amounts are, there is flexibility in transferring from another account to another account without a specific limit. But I can follow up after the meeting.
yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. That was the only thing. It was all great.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. I found that the report was very extensive and well laid out. Additionally, it has been added to the format that council's previous suggestions regarding the detailed labor information and 2022 actual comparative data. With it coming directly to a busy council meeting, I was a little concerned that it doesn't get the fulsome review and discussion it warrants. So I had considered the idea of deferring it, but I think September is just going to be as busy. And as in the past, I can go back and I can ask some questions and that through email. So I was going to leave that at this point in time, but I didn't have an opportunity. I only got a chance to review it this morning. And I'm just going to make one suggestion, which is with the labor report, the Appendix B, it may be beneficial when I get into my question about it. It could stand out to me quickly if I was looking at 2022. What was the percentage for labor at the halfway point in 2022? So I'm just going to make that suggestion that may be helpful if we could have 2022 actual there as a percentage of the overall 2022 budget. Because I'm going to ask something in regards to the 47% situation that we're seeing with 2023. That's just a suggestion. So on page 7 is the Part B staff vacancies, and it lists 16 positions that are vacant, if I understand it, because there is one that makes a reference to one of 4 positions not filled. It does also indicate that there's 6 new positions that are on that list that are within the 2023 budget. So that suggests to me that there's about a dozen that are legacy positions that are already in the 2023 budget. So when I look at the $800,000, which is about the amount of money difference that the 47% is to what it would be if it was 50%. If I'm correct, it seems to me like that's come from a major portion of will come from these vacancies that we have right now that we're looking to fill the positions. So I guess my question would be to the treasurer. We're showing 47%. That's about $800,000 less than the halfway amount of budget, and I'm assuming assuming that it's because of those dozen vacancies generally that is contributing to that?
Treasurer Quinlan, can you answer that? Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Deputy Mayor Fryer. So I think there's a lot of sort of things happening in the industry in general, but also within our own staffing and trying to sort out the filling of those positions. But yes, I would say that the vacancies do have a certain amount of, or are probably one of the biggest issues and concerns when it comes to the 800,000. But I would also really take, a moment to say we're, at this point, we would expect to be at 50%. We're at 47, so that's a 3% differential. Understanding that there's, that dollar amount associated with it. I think also that moving into sort of the summertime seasonal space attributes to that as well. It's not a perfect reflection of the seasonality that comes into play. But I would say, yes, the vacancies are listed there because of the impact that they have. There's quite a bit of context provided as well for each vacancy. But certainly it is part of the positive variance that's included for this year.
If I may, Mayor Hanlon.
Yep.
I made the suggestion about the 2022 data because you're showing 47% at this point in time, or the halfway point. I'm assuming your expectation is that we're still going to be close to being on budget, or the 3% may not continue through and such that it'll probably drop down a little bit.
Go ahead.
If I may, Your Worship. We are hopeful that that we are successful in the updated hiring processes that HR is currently managing. What I've included as part of the forecasted amount to the end of the year is a slight improvement, but being very conservative as well as we move through the remainder of 2023.
Thank you, Mayor Hanlon. Just one last point. The major reason I was looking at it, I was thinking about the fact that it's $800,000 better to budget at the midway point, but we're only forecasting a surplus at the end of the year of 238. So I figured that probably some of it was a timing thing because it will be caught up, so to speak, to the actual budgeted amounts. So any questions I have over and above that, I'll just be able to do by email as I have in the past. So as I said, I'm fully supportive of receiving the report.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I'll just say I'm actually amazed that we're so close to budget halfway through. 47%. I wish my house worked like that. So anyway, thank you very much. So we'll bring this to a vote. All those in favor? Thank you. That passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is also for Treasurer Quinlan. It has to do with the grant application for the Housing Accelerator Fund.
Thank you, Your Worship. So staff have provided a report on the grant program called the Housing Accelerator Fund. The reason for this report is to receive Council's support to move forward with an application. Just a little tidbit about what the Housing Accelerator Fund is. It's a $4 billion initiative that was announced by the federal government in early spring of 2023. The intention of the fund is to provide funding to cities and towns to develop innovative measures to unlock new housing supply and fast track the creation of 100,000 new homes across Canada. Now, although I know $4 billion is a lot of money, what we need to recognize is that this grant application is this grant amount is across Canada, not just within Ontario. The application window opened on July 4th and closes on Friday, August 18th, but staff have been busy working on it, in fact, since the spring, since the announcement. The program is being administered by the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, or CMHC, as we most of us know it as, and they have been extremely helpful and in guiding what was the pre-application process of this fund. So to be eligible for the incentive, the town needs to present an application, and that application has to include a housing supply action plan, including at a minimum of 7 initiatives within that action plan. We are also going to have to commit to a housing supply growth target within that action plan that increases on average by at least 10%. In addition to that, the growth rate must also exceed 1.1%. We will be required to complete or update a housing needs assessment report, which we've also included an additional recommendation or request within this report to ask for council to approve the timeline for our housing needs assessment report, which is required as well. And of course, we'll have to agree to the program requirements beyond that. I think what's really important to understand is that the Housing Accelerator Fund is intended to drive transformational change and create the conditions for more housing supply over the longer term. It's not an incentive program to go or to include infrastructure, although that was our hope at the beginning of this grant program being provided. We have been told that the infrastructure situation in our town is not, we don't have the ability to include it as an initiative. That being said, we can use the funding to go towards any infrastructure needs that we would like. But it's to be very clear, the funding's not directly underwriting any specific housing projects or reimbursing for specific costs, but it can be used to support housing under any of the following categories that they have included, which one, of course, is the infrastructure required for housing. I think it's expected, although it's not required, it is expected that having council's endorsement to submit this application will strengthen our chances to receive this funding, and was the reason to add this report to today's agenda. So I think that's all we have.
Thank you. I'll read in the motion now that Staff Report T 2023-16, Housing Accelerator Fund grant application be received, and that Council directs staff to apply for the Housing Accelerator Fund, and further that the scheduled review dates for the housing needs assessment be in line with the census timelines and at least every 5 years. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Jeffrey, Councillor Houston. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll just say I'd just like to thank staff for being on top of this. And I know a lot of hard work went into seeing if we would qualify and what we could qualify for even before the application were open for municipalities to take part of. So thank you for being on top of this. And it's a great opportunity for us. So fingers crossed. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Item 7.4, CAO 2023-09, Resources Review, Engineering, Environmental Services, and Public Works. And I'll turn this over to our CAO for a brief update. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I thought I should say a couple of words about this one because it is a big decision for council. I just have it's just a brief overview highlighting largely a few of the amendments. The ask is twofold. One is that we're able to create a full-time transit position, which actually involves 2 positions, a transit coordinator and a public works technician. So that would mean from an existing full position and a half of a new transit position that was endorsed by council at the time of budget. We would use a vacant part-time winter position, a reclassification of a couple of positions, and funding anticipated from the town of Blue Mountains for transit services provided to that municipality to create the 2 positions. So there would be a transit position and a public work tech position from 1.5 positions. The second ask is for an engineering position. We are looking at a manager level position anticipated and targeted. However, the placeholder that is proposed is up to a director's salary. In this scenario, 2 managers could be dedicated to operational delivery by type of work. So we would have transportation and stormwater with one, which are our historical public works scope, water and wastewater with another, so running the 2 plants and distribution and collection. And 2 managers would divide the development management, asset management, including growth studies and plans, capital projects, and construction management for all types of works. In this scenario, the managers would be working managers, so they'd be leading projects and delivery themselves as well as through their teams. And to finalize that, we may receive input from a recruitment consultant. I know that adding staff resources is always a difficult decision for council. Frankly, it's a hard one to recommend as well. The addition of a permanent staff member to the public and likely to you sounds like taxes going up. It sounds like the addition of premium jobs in the bureaucracy and the ability to create red tape. It sounds like it should have been done at budget time. It sounds like we should be able to push staff harder, that there's some efficiencies that we should have been able to create or could create to replace this ask. And finally, I know that it sounds like if we need to downsize later for whatever reasons in the economy or otherwise, that we'd have legal requirements now for notice or time in lieu and possibly other settlements. On the other side of that, I want to remind the public and what council and staff are facing, which is a really large amount of engineering, environmental services, and public works coming within the next 10 years, and not likely to abate. A couple of these: high-level wastewater treatment plant expansion, a water treatment plant expansion, the stormwater master plan, and the implementation of all the work that we're going to be facing, particularly with some climate change scenarios, particularly through our older parts of town. The transportation master plan renewal, which I think is more than an update. I do think this is a rethink on how we think about transportation and active transportation and speeds and other things within our community. We have asset management planning and new requirements for reconstruction in thinking about how we fund and reconstruct the assets that council's already stewarding. We have a large amount of infiltration coming into our sanitary flows at the wastewater plant, and is a project in itself to identify and mitigate those flows. We have the management of the highest pace of development Town of Collingwood has seen, I believe, in our current lifetimes. Potentially there was some time when the shipyards were just getting started when we may have been at this pace, but it's quite unusual and doesn't seem to be stopping. And a renewal of the development standards, among other stuff. I didn't ask for this position when requesting the 2023 budget, and in retrospect, I fully admit that I should have asked for this. We do have a need to push through some very large projects and a pace of completion that the council would like to see on a couple of those at the end of the year or shortly into next year. We have staff that are strained. The number of and lengths of unplanned leaves are going up based on what people are being asked to do. We have some new regulatory requirements we never expected at the beginning of the year, everything from turning back development fees if we don't get through the development comments and decisions fast enough. We have a few regulatory requirements related to excess soil and how we manage our collection systems for stormwater, et cetera, that the province has asked us for. And frankly, there's a number of ongoing open loops with residents and neighborhoods, particularly related to development, that need questions and action that I don't feel as comfortable as I would like to feel around us having set those developments up in an optimal way to begin with, and then to get back to people as things are delivered. I imagine when we come to council that every member here would ask themselves, how are we supposed to deliver in this context, or how do we think staff will deliver in this context? And we did go through a full list of things. Is it a management or a skills problem? Can we hire more temporary help? Both of which have examined and done with a retiree from a large municipality supporting Director Slama on a couple of projects. Using more consultants so that we don't need to get into the place where we're committed to staff. Long-term commitments to staff. We are already using the roster extensively. We're very maxed out with writing and evaluating RFPs And there is a certain benefit from coming with that extended knowledge. We're doing things like the transportation master plans, the engineering standards, where taking the information that's used and integrating the values and culture of Collingwood back into the work is important. And with the pace of change that we're experiencing being so high, there's high consequences if things are not built right. We don't put the traffic calming into the developments when they're built, or we don't include the right cross-section for the active transportation and bike lanes. We don't get that chance to put it in later. Or if we do get that chance, it's much more expensive. So there are some reasons to have staff with that longevity, if it is possible. It remains a fallback if we're not able to resource that. We would have to hire more consultants to do things that I would prefer staff did, but there is always that opportunity that consultants could be hired. Frankly, I do think we'd be lucky to attract a skilled resource. And some of the best benefits that we have to leverage to get good people here is how amazing Collingwood and the South Georgian Bay are to live. And we have a great set of positive relationships with council, within council and staff, and within the community. And if we do get a good resource, they'll need to be brought on board to learn about Collingwood and how we do things. So it'll take them a few months to truly get up to full speed. It was mentioned in the Q2 report, there's a number of vacant positions for the periods already in 2023. In talking with the treasurer, I believe that we're fine for the quarter or so of the year that would remain for these two resources within the current budget. It would, of course, decrease any surplus available for reallocation under our policies at year end. Pending council's decision today, changes would be incorporated in the base budget presented to council for 2024. The tax levy impacts for the four-manager scenario is in the amendments, and it increases the cost in taxes, I'm talking about tax impact costs right now, from about $210,000 to $296,000. And if you do the math, that's about $85,000 difference in taxes with the four-manager scenario. And with the transit and public works technologists, the other ask, the scenario change is about $6,000 in additional cost because of the changes in the levels of the positions and the contributions of the town of Blue Mountains. Overall, I think this is affordable, and the remainders would be spread within development charges, user fees related to wastewater. So they wouldn't go away. They would just be covered in other larger functioning portfolios where benefit is received. The treasurer and I have discussed a commitment to look at efficiencies and cost savings annually with department heads and managers as part of the budget, including for 2024, and looking at options like charging modest fees to visitors or others where it makes sense, or cutting costs, staff, purchases where we can. So we will include that in the budget. We haven't finished the analysis yet, but I just wanted to indicate it was our intention to look at offsets. It really comes down to workload and risks. What is the best outcome you think will happen for the town of Collingwood with the investments available to council? I do see some risks, reputational errors on these large projects like the water treatment plant, wastewater treatment plant. The ability to build what council desires when you give us the instructions with affordable active transportation, a staffing resilience that we can keep everybody working happily with a reasonable workload, and then happy residents who feel fairly treated and get timely responses. Thank you. We look forward to council's direction on these asks and your suggestions.
Thank you for that. I'll read in the motion at this time. That staff report CAO 2023-09, staffing resources, public works, engineering, and environmental services be received, and that council approve one additional full-time staffing complement to meet public works, engineering, and environmental services development and capital needs within the budget range set out in this report, and further that council approve the full-time staffing complement role of coordinator community transit to be achieved through the council approved 2023 budget part-time transit coordinator complement combined with the conversion of a temporary public works truck driver and laborer position. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Baines, Councillor Perry, thank you. Open for discussion and questions. Yes, go ahead, Councillor.
Just to start at this point, I'd just like to have all three severed, please, all three parts.
Okay. Yep. Do we have to have a motion for that? To sever it? No.
no,
We'll just do that when we do. When, I see. Okay.
If you go in parts, it'll
If
be
I can do
easier.
it now? Okay, sure.
Thank you.
So we'll deal with the first part about receiving the report. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. The second part is adding the complement to Public Works Engineering and Environmental Services. Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. I supported this recommendation of the CAOs in the Committee of the Whole, and again support it now. I agree with her that there were a lot of collectively should haves in the past. Not all of them, but most of them of what the CAO reviewed. Having said that, I really think both of these investments, and they are investments, will help, more than help, will improve our performance in dealing with our public and with developers and with actually all the stakeholders involved in this. And effectively, it would seem to me, if I do the math, and I'm not great at math, that you're really talking about the fourth quarter in 23, which is, I estimated, somewhere between 45 and 60,000 all in with benefits. I'm not sure that's accurate, but nevertheless. But it's 2024 where the full impact of this will hit us. And the quid pro quo of that is, and I'm sure other members of council, if we accept this, we're going to have much sharper pencils next year with that budget. And part of the things that we may lose, and I would point out that Director Quinlan's Housing Accelerator Fund application, a small thing, if you will, but nevertheless, it took staff time to deal with that application and submit it. Now, it might be different in engineering and various other departments, but I think that's the sort of thing, if we keep going down the road that we will be losing, if you have to ask staff to focus more on critical core elements, which I think we will, but that, I think, is the quid pro quo of what the future will bring to us. I agree with this recommendation to hire these two additional positions, but as we sharpen our pencils for the 24 budget year, we must realize that some things have to be left, I think, behind. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey?
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. So, yeah, this one is it's a really hard one for me. I really do strongly believe that the next budget is going to be pretty challenging. And I think the sense I'm getting already from staff on a lot of things is it's going to be a whopper. And I'm not getting the sense of what we're going to be able to cut and not cut. And I think I agree with that this is the decision we need. I'm not sure about the timing right now, because if I can't gauge this with the other bigger things coming to us for next year in terms of our operations and inflation or whatever else is going to hit us, I like to live with no regrets as much as I can. So this is a pretty big decision, because once you make it, it goes fully into 2024. And I know that the CAO is committing to making kind of whatever cannibalization of our budget going forward that she needs to do to make it work. But I have difficulty not having it in the context of what our priorities will be. We haven't completed a community-based strategic plan. We haven't, what are those priorities going to be next budget, and how are we going to fund all of this and prioritize it if we've already spent 0.5% already towards next year's budget. So I'm going back and forth. I'm going to listen to everyone. I think, some of the words that were concerning to me were endeavored, anticipated, and if those things don't work out, then it becomes even more expensive in the next budget. I I do think council needs to be part of the decision for the offsets because those offsets impact how we speak to our residents as well as to what those offsets are. And to kind of be put in a place for next budget to be forced to make those others is going to be pretty difficult. So number one, I guess I agree with what needs to be done. But number two, I think it needs to be done in the greater context of the full financial picture. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. We'll see.
Okay, Councillor Potts.
Thanks, Mayor Hamlin. So to be noted, I'm not in support of this. I guess my concern, and I'll use it just seems like I'll use it as a pyramid building. We want to hire and pad the senior management, and I feel that there's other areas of the town where we can be putting more staff and the boots on the ground. There's a lot of departments. We hear that a lot of senior management are tired, and I don't doubt for 1 minute that they're not tired and they're overworked and there's a lot on their plate, and I get that. But we have a lot of departments in the town that are in the same position. And, we have multiple on-calls and after-hours services they need to provide, on a bi-weekly basis and every 3-4 weeks. And really that does get exhausting. And I've seen where there's been really over the, past number of years, that's never really kind of followed up and positions been added to that. And I see where with this being the case is we consistently, we keep adding senior management positions. We keep adding, coordinator positions, but we leave out the boots on the ground that our taxpayers of the community, this is what they're paying their taxes for, is their level of service. And we need the staff that cut the grass. We need the staff that collect the garbage and plow the snow, and to do that, to maintain what we have here today. And so again, I am definitely not in support of this. And I think that come budget time, I would be happy to see that there would be some maybe implementation of some more boots on the ground services. That's my comments. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else like to comment? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. And I, in considering this, as I've mentioned already, I like to try to compare. And I was having trouble finding information that I felt confidence in. I was looking through you to the CAO Skinner. What is our full-time equivalent complementary for 2022? So going into this year.
Would anyone have that information? Thank you.
Thank you, through the chair. I would have to look that up. We do have it readily at hand, but I don't have it in front of me at this moment. It's over 200, something in the 212 comes to mind, but I wouldn't want to be married to that number.
Okay, so just follow up. So I was looking at the chart on page 24 of the IT report because that's the last thing we've seen that had some information about full-time equivalents. And it said 248 in 2021. And I looked at the FIR data to 2021 and compared it to 2018. And it looks to me like that's about 40 additional positions compared to what was reported in 2018. And I may not be right with that, but that's the data I had to work with. And I had a little bit of trouble using that one because it shows, as I said, when I was trying to compare, it shows New Tech, which is roughly the same size as us, as having 120 full-time equivalents. And it showed Blue Mountain, which is 9,000 people, having 250. So I'm really not sure what I'm looking at. And that, I guess that's the crunch of it for me. I continue to have difficulty looking at these two positions in isolation of the normal budgetary detail that we would have on labor and cost and comparative data. So I'm at this point in time, I continue to have the position I had last vote, that I'm not in favor of new positions at this time. We're going to be filling 12 positions over the next few months, and I'm hoping that will help. But I'll just close off and say that we've all been working very hard due to normal, workload impacts, but also the growth pressures and the other factors that are beyond our control. And I do appreciate staff's tremendous efforts, but I won't be supporting this. Thank you.
CO, did you want to add something?
Thank you, Chair. I'd love to respond to a few of these. I don't know if you want me to wait until the end.
Yeah, why don't you wait?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Councillor Ring?
Just probably echoing what's just been said. I agree wholeheartedly with Councillor Jeffrey. I keep forgetting not to keep calling my first name. Anyways, it's a timing thing more for me. Although I'm having a hard time, not just the timing for all the reasons that were mentioned. I'm also having a hard time that it was just 5 months ago that we approved the budget, and there was nothing said at that time. I'm not saying that anybody erred, but I don't know how we went from not even talking about it 5 months ago to being urgent now that we can't wait till the end of the year. As for the reason that was mentioned by Councillor Jeffries was we approved this now, and Councillor Baines tried to rationalize saying that it's only X number of dollars for the last quarter, but that doesn't mean that it's written in stone now for 2024, and we can't do anything about it at budget time. So it's one of the reasons I'm sitting here having a hard time, and I voted against it at the committee, and I think I'll probably still vote against it now.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Doherty? I think you're on mute still.
I am. Sorry, I couldn't find the mute button. Anyway, thank you, Mayor. And I will speak in support of this report from staff and the motion. Our community is among the top fastest growing communities in all of Canada. And so with that, we have a need for any number of very large, very complex, hard and soft infrastructure projects to service that growing community. And that's just over and above the day-to-day operations. We have a sophisticated public, a development community and business community that has high expectations for a level of service. And we know that because of staff shortages or ongoing lack of people in particular roles, that we're not always responding as quickly as we should do to issues in the community. With regard to specifically for the need for a transit coordinator, that was a position that was in the 2023 budget full-time, and it was cut to half. And so staff are now coming back to us again saying, we need this position. We are in process of rolling out a complex but potentially very effective and very cost efficient down the road on-demand transit system. It needs somebody at the helm running it and making sure that it's a success. And you know, overall, this is how I liken it, rightly or wrongly. If our staff were to ask for a capital resource or an operating resource so that they can get a job done right in the short term to the satisfaction of council, our business community, and our residents, we would do it. Now we're asking for a human resource to get the job done effectively, efficiently, and meeting the expectations of our community. I see no difference in that. And for that reason, I will be supporting this motion in its entirety. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, through you. I do understand that we are in a period of unprecedented growth here, and with any growth, if you were to look at this like a business, it would require adding resources to be able to support that. The one question that I would have through you to the CAO would be, if this was to be deferred until budget period, what would the short-term implications be for existing work that may not be completed?
Thank you. CAO?
I think that the biggest, through the chair, I think that the biggest differences would be around not having the resource as quickly. So we'd be looking at making a decision. Council would probably make that decision in December of this year, and it would take us a couple of months to fill that. So we'd be looking at, February, most likely March of 2024 to actually have someone on board instead of later in the fall this year. We are constantly approving developments and managing those developments on the ground. So I think that's one of the areas that I'd like to get some attention on right away to make sure that we had the resources to do that. With respect to the water treatment plant, we have quite a few, well over $100 million in that project that will be teeing up this fall. So with any luck, we'll have people putting shovels in the ground there. So there's a lot of decisions to be made. We do have our engineering consultant that's been managing that project, doing the work to do the contract administration, but we will be within our staff making sure that the money is flowing properly. We're doing appropriate oversight. And the transportation master plan is going out, as well as the stormwater management plan. So I think the biggest risks relate to just making sure that we've made the best decisions for the community through the fall. And I think that there are a couple of significant ones that are being made by managers and staff that are very busy.
Thank you.
Councillor Jeffrey?
Thank you. Just a very specific, when is it anticipated we would get the first draft of the budget? Through to the treasurer, I guess.
Okay. Treasurer, do you have an idea?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, the initial plan is for staff to bring a sort of environmental scan in September, and then mid-October would be the first draft of the 2024 budget.
Thank you.
So if we're able to make this decision now, we would also be able to make this decision if we deferred it till after the first blush of that environmental scan and the first budget information, and that would still kind of get us ahead of the curve. Is that correct?
CEO?
Yes, that would be a more desirable time than December. In my point of view, not as desirable as today, but you are the decision makers.
So I guess what I may be proposing when the conversation is ready to amend the second paragraph, which we're working on right now, and that council refer to the first draft budget time frame approval of one, and the rest stays the same.
Thank you. I'll just throw in my 2 cents here. Really appreciate all the comments around the table. I think they, reflect all of the worries that anyone might have. And I think my biggest concern is, we sit here as council, but we don't really know the inner workings of our staff, and that's not our job. To know, do we need a manager? Do we need a boots on the ground person? Do we need this? Do we need that? I mean, I think we'd all agree we need more boots on the ground from the calls we get. But I also know, and here's my big worry, if we're providing infrastructure, we have to have somebody, enough senior people, because boots on the ground people can't do this. We need enough senior people to manage the construction of $100 million plus water plant, get the environmental assessment started and probably preliminary drawings for a wastewater treatment plant expansion. We haven't talked here this term about the stormwater situation in our town, but there was a report last term that had maps attached to it that showed how much of our community is susceptible to flooding. And we have major work to do in this community. And I don't know what the work is. We're about to start a phase 2 project, but it's going to need substantial understanding of the work that consultants will do for us and how we're going to protect our community from flooding. And all these projects with all these residents that are calling us because they haven't been, we haven't had the staff to fix problems from developers who haven't done the best job finishing up their subdivisions. And we are still approving subdivisions. And what does this mean to me? What do you know? We're a growth community, and like every other community that's expanded, look at York Region 20 years ago. They went from tiny little communities. You could barely find Vaughan's Town Hall to, major metropolises. Now, we're not going to a major metropolis, touch wood, but we still have all this pressure. And it's, to my view, it's not for us to be delving into, how we're going to produce this. I think we can decide we don't want to grow, we don't want infrastructure, and we don't want to update our master traffic plan. But if we're going along this path that we've been going along, how are we going to get there? And I know it would be good to wait. If we were doing the budget now, this would be so clear. But are we saying to ourselves we might not do this when we're looking at the budget? We may have other priorities. And if that's the case, okay, we'll have that discussion, but we better tell our development community and the people who want to move here that we're just not going to be going down that path, because I don't see how we're going to get there. So I'll just say I'm in support of this. I don't know what we can gain by waiting, because I don't think that I'll have any more information, at least in September, October, November, December, about whether we need a manager. I hope we'll have some funds to put more boots on the ground. I am so with you on this, because we need all these things. We have so many more homes that we have to service, so many more streets, so many more parks, and we're building more parks. And I'm getting people calling me saying, why don't we ever, fix up the Friendship Garden? Like, why does that look so bad? And I said, well, we only have so many parks, people. But we've just added so many more parks. So all I'm saying is this is the reality of where I think we are right now. And I certainly appreciate if people want to wait to budget, but I don't think that's wise for our community right now. And so I'll be supporting this. Thank you. Yes, you go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. There was a couple of things I wanted to clarify. The engineering work that I'm talking about is not optional. Generally, we need to do it. Some of the pieces we could push out, but it is painful to push them, things like updating the development standards, because I think we all want the community to be built a little different in the future than our standards dictate. So we would need to resource it with people or consultants. I think the money is going to be spent in any case, but the question is it a person or a consultant? Some of that's under your control with respect to priorities. Actually, all of it's under your control. Some of it's under your more direct control with respect to reevaluating the priorities. The other vacancies, filling them doesn't help this position. All of the positions are very specific around what they're for. You can read down, the list, but things of the 16 or so that are on the list. I did want to make a note that the list that's in the Q2 financial report is a snapshot at the end of Q2. So some have come on and some have gone off the list, but it's still a reasonably large range of positions. In fact, the number of positions on that chart makes me more stressed about it, because there is right now a large turnover of people in the municipal world that are going back and forth with different municipalities. And I don't want us to lose any more people that get caught up and maybe going to work somewhere else without us having an appropriate base there. In any case, I don't think filling them is going to help. It's going to help directly. The best source of FTEs I've had a chance to consider and some notes is probably the budget from last year. So we have the budget from last year showing that the total amounts, I think it's 249.46 proposed in the latest version. But in the end, I think there was at least a half a position, being the transit half position, that council had not endorsed because we had looked at another alternative at the time that was endorsed. One of the members mentioned that we need more boots on the ground, and I did want to draw your attention to the fact that we've been putting more boots on the ground. If you look at what, for example, was approved in the budget for this year, pending a report back that you haven't received, is an arborist, and then further, the ones that were approved, a water operator, a part-time audio-visual coordinator, a customer service seasonal permanent position, the part-time transit, half-time transit position, a project administrator for the grain terminals that was offset by a different position that was eliminated, and outdoor rink operators for PRC. And if you'll recall from last year, we had things like some parks positions that were converted to be full-time, so they'd be available in the winter. So I think council has been focused on boots on the ground, and that you don't have to worry as much as you had thought on some of those pieces, because we all know that those are some of our most important workers to get the things done that people are appreciating in this town. Very hard to compare municipalities, in part because when you look at the number of people or the salaries of people, depending on if they have a pool or an arena or their public works are outsourced or they have their own truck and plow drivers, you really would have to do a comprehensive review. And so there's also level of service differences between communities. So whether it's outsourced, insourced, and whether they actually have the services and what the level of service that they deliver. And I think that the deputy mayor had indicated some of those challenges, which I totally agree with. And with respect to just 5 months ago when we were looking at things, that is true. But I do think if we are looking for this kind of depth in our engineering group, it's better to start now to try and find those folks. After the budgets are approved, if we do the December timeframe, we'll be in a batch with a lot of municipalities who've suddenly decided to upscale what are probably some very strongly needed and rare municipal expertise resources. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll, did you have a minute you wanted to put on the floor, Councillor Jeffrey?
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. So I would just like to amend the paragraph we're considering now to say, and that council refer to, with the same timing as the first draft budget, to approve one additional full-time, and the rest says the same.
Okay. Clerk Thomas?
Certainly. So we won't do that as an amendment. We'll just do it as a straight referral.
Oh, right. Never mind.
Seconder.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Ring seconded that. All those in favor?
Right to the budget. First budget deliberations in October. And it was just the first position.
Okay, all those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, all those opposed? That's 3, and that carries. Thank you. Okay, and the last one we'll consider is, and further that council approve the full-time staffing complement role of coordinator community transit. Oh, I already read that. Okay, that's the last one. Okay. Any discussion on that one? Councillor Potts.
Thanks, Mayor Hamlin. Just a couple quick comments on this one. Where I had the concern and this one was basically taking a temporary public works truck driver labor position and taking those wages and I guess offsetting the costs. It wasn't that many years ago that the town's big push was to bring the part-time seasonal positions into play for a few reasons. One was level of service. The second one was for hours of work and service for the existing full-time complement. And the third one was to provide in the department a healthy work-life balance. So it alleviated the work pressures. And I get concerned when I see that those start to get eliminated. And I mean, it's, the winters aren't going away and the streets are getting, just as we just talked about, the streets are getting bigger and longer and bigger. We're growing and we're taking these positions away. So that's my concern on that. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comment or question? So we'll just vote. All those in favor? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Okay, and those opposed? 2. Okay, that carries. Thank you. Next matter on the agenda is a motion. So I'll turn this to you, Deputy Mayor, to read your motion in.
Thank you. I'll be pleased to read in my 4-part motion that is all run-on sentences. I'm going to have to do a better job of looking at that in the future. So I read it out, and it is, whereas recently Ontario's independent electricity system operator held update seminars in regards to long-term resource planning for various bodies, including municipalities. And whereas recently the Ontario Energy Board ruled on EPCOR Distribution Limited that serves Collingwood as the local distribution company in regards to their comprehensive cost of service rate application, be it resolved that Council requests that EPCOR Distribution Limited be invited to attend in the near future on a date that is convenient, a Council or Committee of the Whole meeting to provide an update on matters of interest that may include customer rate changes, system and electrification planning, shared services, or any other topic that EPCOR deems appropriate. And further, that Council requests consideration by EPCOR as to reestablishing the joint committee of the two entities that was previously in place during the transition after the sale process was completed, as Collingwood Council is aware of the significant implications of future electrification requirements, amongst other things, and believed there should be regular meetings by the joint committee, as it would be beneficial to both parties to be in regular communication about this and other matters. So I'd like to move that, and if it is seconded to come onto the table, I would like to speak first to it.
Thank you. Would there be a seconder for this? Councillor Jeffrey? Okay, go ahead.
My notes here. Thank you. First and foremost, the proposed motion is intended to reestablish regular interaction, maybe 2 or 3 times per year, between Council and our local distributor of electricity, EPCOR. At least in the near term, because of the major initiatives that are going to require effective partnership between us to achieve success. Also, since the municipality is such a close and excellent relationship, maintaining what we had under our ownership, something imperative to me when I agreed to sell to them. EPCOR is a tenant in our facility with a long-term lease. They share the facilities with municipal staff, so undoubtedly some shared services, even if just in kind. They provide Collingwood streetlight maintenance at the required safety standards, amongst other things. Initially, this should help to give all members of Council a better understanding of EPCOR's operations within our municipal boundaries, but also importantly to the portions of Clearview and Town of Blue Mountains, so Stayner, Creemore, and Thornbury. When Collingwood Council convinced our neighbors to sell their assets to us over 20 years ago, a major factor was long-term commitment to maximize the benefits, most specifically lower distribution charges than what would be applied by likely the only other alternative, Hydro One. Ontario's independent electricity system operator is tasked with oversight of what is forecasted to be a massive investment in electricity delivery to end users that will hopefully ensure infrastructure requirements are in place. They will be communicating and directing service deliverers, Hydro One, who provides transformation services, and EPCOR, providing our local distribution services, as well as keeping in touch with municipalities. In addition to the expected increased requirements to meet the needs of electrification for electric vehicles, one unique situation that could occur in the near term is the Grain Terminals Revitalization Project. If council agrees with the motion and EPCOR attends, we can get their input, and it will give us an opportunity to discuss how best to move forward on these and related initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anyone have any questions or comments? Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. So my first question is, what would the proposed start date be visioned as if it was approved? And if it's something that can be developed for perhaps next year through you to the deputy mayor, if he had considered the timing for this to come on board?
Thank you.
I had considered that it would be something that staff would take forward and reach the, as I said, appropriate timing in my motion. So it'd be a joint effort between our staff and EPCOR as to when they thought it would be the best time to approach.
Sounds good. So through you again, Mayor Hamlin, so we would envision the development of a terms of reference that was mutually agreeable to both parties? Is that the kind of, or are you just envisioning just a conversation?
I think when they present to, sorry, Mayor Hamlin, I should have.
Yes, go
through you,
ahead.
sorry.
Yeah.
My anticipation was that first there's the invite to come and speak to us, and they may have a different route that they would see working out, and I'd be willing to listen to that. I'm putting forward the idea of us being interested in the joint committee because it was used in the past. And I do believe that we do need to have communication, but there might be a better methodology that is presented by EPCOR through communication with our staff too.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? So, I don't know, I think I have a question and some comments. One of my concerns is, and I certainly appreciate that this used to be a municipally owned utility, and that they're a tenant in our building for now, although they've indicated it's not their long-term preference. But what about our other utilities that are regulated? I appreciate that EPCOR's rates are controlled by the tribunal it's been at recently. Enbridge gets its rates controlled. Bell and Rogers are controlled by the CRTC. We have a lot of regulated utilities that are providing services to our community. So I'm sort of two minds about this, because I think, well, you know, we are having a lot of electrification going to be happening in Ontario, but where will these other utilities fit in, like gas or the deep water cooling? I understand that's a possibility for the terminals, and which, you know, in Toronto's example, saves an incredible amount of electricity because they're using the water from the Great Lakes that they abut to handle their heating and cooling systems. So to my mind, I don't have enough of an understanding of the utilities generally. And also I'll just say, what about the TC Energy project in Meaford that's going to get approved if things are going according to where they're going? Like, how does that fit into all this? I feel like I need some kind of understanding before I delve into working with one supplier of energy. And is there a staff person who can say, yeah, there's something to know, or no, there isn't, and give me some guidance on this? Nobody. Okay, go ahead, CEO. Take it on.
Thank you, Mayor. It's not an area that, since the dissolution of the electrical utility with the town, that we've had our pulse on. I do have questions related to broader energy sources, which include gas as well as electrical and the various pieces. And depending on what that looks like, there's also the broader geography of Southern Georgian Bay, because I think that there may be other municipalities who are also interested in those pieces. And you mentioned a few of the big projects. with respect to sort of understanding this. I did have a chance at a recent conference to talk with the representatives from IESO, Electrical Energy Systems of Ontario, which are the folks that are strategically looking at across all the municipalities. And I know that you'd been asking if there was a member of council who was interested in monitoring those pieces, and Councillor Potts had indicated some interest, and possibly others with respect to that monitoring. I think they also have a role to play on electrification and other energy needs for our community moving forward. I do think that some of the day-to-day pieces, the sharing of the facility, for example, we can handle on an operational basis with the key decisions such as entering contracts being reviewed and endorsed by council. Thank you.
Okay. Deputy Mayor.
Maybe just to assist a little as well, because having been a board member of Center Wellington Hydro, I just came off at the beginning of the year. I look at the way we were handling informing the municipality, and knowing that it was beneficial to the municipality and their endeavors. And I would add that there's no other utility in town that we deal with that we have such a direct relationship with. And as I mentioned when Councillor Jeffrey asked her questions, I'm not opposed to when EPCOR comes and speaks with us if there's a different approach to the joint committee. It's just, I do believe that it would be beneficial to council, and I think especially the 5 new members that don't have any background. I have background, so I have a very good understanding of EPCOR's workings. So it was just to invite them here to discuss how they see their plans moving forward, and as I said, if they see a benefit to a little bit more of a liaison and establishing the committee again.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I think, oh, sorry. Yes, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Mayor. I will speak in favor of this motion. Having been formerly on the Community Advisory Committee with EPCOR during the first 2 years of their operation, I found it to be very beneficial, speaking for myself, and I think speaking for the council of the day. And I can see no reason why, unless it is not the desire of EPCOR, that such communication could not carry forward. With regard to some of the alternate energy systems and programs that we're starting to see develop in our area, like the stored water system in, and I probably haven't named that right, in Meaford, or the regional energy system that's being considered, or at least touted for the terminals redevelopment project. I believe that these alternatives could be under the purview of any of our traditional energy providers if they are so interested. Yeah, for those reasons, I would support this, pending obviously the support of EPCOR. I also would very much like to hear from EPCOR, as we haven't had an opportunity as all of council to hear from them recently. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think, from my perspective, I'm, of course, not opposed to inviting EPCOR to speak to us on things on their mind. But I'm not of a mind to support the establishment of a committee at this time. I don't see that we have a problem that we need to solve. I think we have a lot of committees right now. We have a lot that's going on. And I think we need a little more information on, or at least I do, on what kind of committee would best serve us as we grow into the future. Who do we need to hear from as we sort out our energy needs? And Councillor Potts is going to become an expert in this, and he'll be advising us. And certainly appreciate your interest, Deputy Mayor, because you worked there for many decades, and it was your career. But for me, I just can't support the second part. So I'm going to sever these parts. And so we'll now proceed to vote. So the first, sorry. No, I think you already spoke. You have a technical or procedural matter?
Well, I'm asking for consideration by EPCOR about the joint committee. I'm not asking necessarily for council to approve the joint committee. We're asking for consideration.
Council
And based
requests
on that
consideration.
information-
So what you're saying is your request is that we ask EPCOR if they'd like to have a committee, but we're not, doesn't mean that we're committing to it.
I definitely meant that if that's not conveyed, yes.
Okay, but how can we extend an invitation if we don't mean to participate in it?
I'm just requesting their consideration, and then
Okay,
when they
I got it.
visit us, they could elaborate at that point in time.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to divide the two asks there between the first part is to resolve that we request EPCOR to attend at a future meeting, that part. Okay, all those in favor? And that's unanimous, thank you. And the second part is to establish, request consideration by EPCOR to establish a joint committee for these various reasons. All those in favor? And there's one opposed. That carries. Thank you. Okay, the next motion, so do we, yeah, no, that's it. Thank you. The next matter on the agenda is 8.2, the motion re the Collingwood Arts Centre, Phase 3, and this is Councillor Houston's motion, and I'll turn it to you to read your motion in.
Thank you, Mayor. Whereas the town of Collingwood has identified the need to move into Phase 3 of the Collingwood Arts Centre feasibility study, and whereas the involvement of various stakeholders, including the mayor, council members, staff, industry professionals, BIA, and the public, will ensure the development aligns with the needs and vision of the public community. Now, therefore, be it resolved that a steering committee for the Collingwood Arts Centre be formed as per the following structure: the mayor of the town of Collingwood or a designated representative, one member of Collingwood Town Council, director of PRC, and other appropriate town staff as may be required at the direction of the CAO, 3 representatives from the local arts or relevant industry, 3 members of the public with a demonstrated interest in arts and culture. Be it further resolved that the steering committee shall work collaboratively with the consultant to steer the Phase 3 business case of the Collingwood Arts Centre such that it aligns with council's direction, incorporating the needs and visions of artists, the arts industry, and the public, and provides the best opportunity for a vibrant and sustainable arts centre.
Thank you. Would you like to speak first or last?
Yeah, I can speak first.
Go ahead.
So we have a number of...
I'll second the motion.
Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you. Okay.
We have a number of individuals and groups that have been advocates for the need of this project since the conversation started about an arts center. These proponents bring a level of expertise that has unique value to this project because not only of their activity in the arts sector, but because they are living in this community and they are closely connected to the community's needs that will bring value to the planning process of this project. Since we're now moving into Phase 3 of the feasibility study, which will further dive into specifics around things like location and facility needs, it seems appropriate to me at this time to bring local stakeholders into the conversation in the form of a committee that can work with the town and the consultants to ensure that the project reflects the full needs and vision of the community as a whole.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. In support of the motion, just wondered about the list of people. How would they be chosen? I guess starting first with the one member of town council.
I think that question could be directed to Clerk Thomas. Thank you.
My apologies. Can you repeat the question?
I just was seeking clarification on the selection process. Who would be selecting the three representatives, I guess, and the three members of the public, and the one member of council. I think the other ones are all obviously designated.
Thank you, through your worship. It would follow our recruitment policy. So we would do advertising unless it was otherwise stipulated. So unless it was that the members of council had, similar to what we had proposed for the steering committee for the community-based strategic plan, we gave that group the flexibility to appoint their own additional members in accordance with the criteria proposed. So this one, in the lack of anything specific, it would become under the recruitment policy approved by council.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. Just one.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I'll just say thank you for bringing this forward. It's a great idea. Okay, all those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. 8.3 is Strategic Plan Downtown Master Plan, membership in the steering committee. Clerk Thomas, is this your item?
Thank you, Your Worship. We do have three members of council that have expressed their interest in two position vacancies for the helping with the, or I should say, leading the steering committee for the community-based strategic plan and the downtown master plan. So we have received, as I said, three individuals, and so we will be proceeding based on the order of the nominations we received. So we have Councillor Potts, we have Deputy Mayor Fryer, and we have Councillor Houston. And I will just first of all ask the question, does all members that provided a nomination wish to keep their name in the pot?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So based on the order of nominations, I will ask Councillor Potts to first, providing up to a maximum of 2 minutes, express the reason why you're interested in this position and why your colleagues should elect you to this role.
Thanks, Clerk Thomas. Being that currently I'm sitting on one committee with the Sports Hall of Fame that meet maybe 2-3 times a year, I find this is a great way to again engage and to get engaged in the community. I attend a lot of events and I'm in the community every day, and I just find that with this, I threw my name forward simply because I think it's somewhere where I can be of help and also learn lots along the way. So really, when it comes down to looking to be, contributing more of my time to committees and with currently what I'm doing, there's no better way to engage. That's it.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Potts. Next, Deputy Mayor Fryer.
Thank you, Clerk Thomas. Having participated in the first community-based strategic plan developed around 2015, which helped to establish the foundation of the 2020 plan, I'm very interested and eager to become involved in the steering committee for our next plan. Additionally, as reviewed last week by Clerk Thomas, I consider being part of this community initiative to be a duty of the Deputy Mayor. In that capacity, I sit as a county councillor and am participating in the updating of their strategic plan, which allows me to bring that additional component into play, allowing me to be better prepared. As Deputy Mayor, I find myself out and about in a major way, interacting with community members regularly at open houses, flag raisings, business recognitions, and other similar initiatives. I believe that gives me a very good insight into the pulse of the community, which also will allow me to be better prepared to participate. Therefore, I would appreciate council support to be accepted to the steering committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Fryer. Councillor Houston.
Thank you. I looked at this as an extension and use of some of my past experience, having helped out previously with Economic Development Action Plan and my previous year's work with the downtown BIA, I really just looked at this as an opportunity to continue some of that strategic planning work that I've worked at over the last few years.
Thank you. So now we will go into our election process at this point. So every member will have 2 votes, and it'll be the individuals that receive a majority vote. If by chance in the second vote there's not a majority, once we will re-vote with the remaining 2 members until a majority is received. So our first nomination was for Councillor Potts. So all those in favor, and you can vote for yourselves as well. All those in favor? Okay. The next one for Deputy Mayor Fryer. Our majority. But Councillor Potts with 8 votes, Deputy Mayor Fryer with 5 votes. Are your nominees appointed to our strategic base, a community-based strategic plan, the Downtown Master Plan?
Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is our proceeding into in-camera. There are 2 matters listed here. The second matter was one we could possibly go in camera if we needed to when we discussed that item previously. But we did resolve that matter without the need to go in camera. That was item, don't go away, that was item 7.4. So there's just A that I'll be making reference to. So the motion is as follows. Whereas the clerk hereby concurs the reasons for the in-camera session have been duly reviewed and considered, and the matters are authorized under the exception provisions to conduct a closed session in accordance with the Municipal Act prior to proceeding into closed session. Therefore, be it resolved that this council proceeds in camera in order to address a matter pertaining to the security of the property of the town or local board. We don't need B. And the last one is a position plan procedure criteria or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board. And so the item for discussion is the water treatment plant expansion. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Potts and Councillor Perry. All those in favor, and that's unanimous. Thank you. So we're going to move into the Braniff room. And although there will be arising from that, the only matter on the agenda will be the confirmatory bylaw. We won't have a report from the water treat expansion. For those following at home. Is there anything else I should have mentioned, Clerk Almas? That's it. Okay, thank you. So we'll move into in camera. Thank you.
Need our laptops?
Do we need our laptops?
There is a report.
There is
If
a
you wish to
report.
refer to the report,
I
but
saw that.
otherwise, no.